Greetings. I'm Brother Judah from the Congregation of Israel, a representative of the NMP, the Nazarene Messianic Party. And I'd like to welcome you to the Biblical School of Global Liberation for all oppressed people. And we approach the Bible from a social political perspective. And we argue that is the correct way to approach the Bible. I'd like to greet all the people who's coming in: Comrade Tilson, Black, Lewis, greetings to you. Thank you for taking the time out to join us. Um, what I do, just make sure that your mics are muted when we going to invite. I normally invite people to the stage, but just make sure your mics are muted. And if you want to bring anything or need clarity, and today I want to put this on the record since we're entering into this clubhouse paradigm. I do want to put this on the record about our topic tonight is biblical salvation for the nations. Is biblical salvation for the nations. And bear with me a moment. We're going to get going with this. Uh, peace to you, comrade. Kish, she come into the room. Peace to you. Um, Sister Sandal, peace to you. Uh, Shalom.
Shalom, brother Judah.
Shalom. I think I did. All right. And so today, um, I want to address a subject that, again, we're going to do what we attempt to do, approach it from a social political perspective. And when we're looking at the salvation for the nations, I was told that there's a saying going on about plantation salvation or salvation plantation. Just some others, just some words and catchphrases or whatever that it really don't have much to it. And when we study history, and that's what we're going to involve today when we study in history, because if you ask people and put them in a corner, you talking about salvation, saved from what? That's a whole nother subject in it within itself. But if you have the nations and you have subdued the nations and you claim that the nations are your enemies, by default, you saying you're their enemies. And therefore, if you subdue them into oppression, because I heard them say it myself back in before the year 2000, that the nations will, the white man, they would say, will be oppressed by the year 2000. And I've heard it come out their own mouth when they up there videotaping themselves on the streets. And it was some of their, respected leaders. One in particular I'm making reference to, he's dead now, from my understanding. He called himself the Comforter. But I'm not getting into all of that nonsense. I'm just simply explaining that, if you're subdued, then you're not saved. If you're subdued by your enemies, you're not saved. Uh, so we're going to look into this. And I would say this for a rule of thumb for people who even can bear to even listen to this topic. Because some people I know they not even, they can't even bear to hear my voice talk about it. But for those who can and who's in search for the truth, I say this with a rule of thumb. Look, the Bible clearly tell you about who you should listen to. And if you have a people who have a track record of false doctrines and lies, then you need to question where it's coming from. And if you don't know because you're new, then you need to go and research the people you learning from. And the vast majority of these organizations, they we say they come out of One West because that was the original school, the Israeli School of Universal Practical Knowledge. They all have pretty much the same teachings. They false teachings from their charts to their to their identifying the children of Israel on these charts, all the way down to predicting that the Christ will return by the year 2000. It all failed. It didn't come to pass, and the Torah tells us what to do with men like that. But since we don't have the government established to perform that deed, then you just need to get away from them. But I know it's going to take some proof, and that's what we want to do today. We want to look into a few things. We're going to look into some history so we could paint the social context. I want to start in Genesis chapter 18, because if we're talking about the salvation to the nations, then we really need to put in perspective what it's about. And so I would like to start in Genesis chapter 18. Um, Genesis chapter 18.
Shalom, Elder. Real quick, did you want me to get that for you? You got it.
You want to read it? It's up to you. You know I can
Sure.
run my mouth now.
Sure. So that way you can go and expound as much as you want. Genesis 18, you said?
Yes, sir. That'll be Genesis 18, and we're gonna start with our regular KJV.
Okay.
And so we can set the stage here. We're gonna start at Genesis 18, starting at verse 17.
This is the book of Genesis, chapter 18, and verses 17. It reads, "And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him."
Now, now, some people will lead you, they want you to believe that the nations that will be blessed in Abraham, if they follow the way of Abraham, if they take hold on to Abraham, some will have you believe that the blessing will be the plantation. I mean, that's just simply ridiculous in so many ways. It just it it's it's almost embarrassing to even really have to address it. You understand what I mean? It's like, for people who think that way, it's probably not much you can really talk to them reasonably. They're really in some type of, I mean, I don't even know if you could say childish or immature. But if you the blessing, let us say that for today we're not even going to entertain that. We're going to, if that's what you believe, okay, believe it. And but just take into consideration another argument. Let's say that this blessing is really a real blessing and it's not a plantation. The next question will have to come is, why would the nations need a blessing? Now, you see what you read here, that all nations in Abraham will be blessed. It's going to sort of give us a hint if we listen carefully. Read that verse from the top again, please.
This is the book of Genesis, chapter 18, and verses 17. "And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him." Verse 19, "For I know him, that he will command his children and his household after him, and they shall keep the way of the Lord, to do justice and judgment, that the Lord may bring upon Abraham that which he hath spoken of him."
Now, think about that. You see how that verse goes with this verse you just read? What is the deal that Abraham's great and mighty nation must perform justice and judgment in the earth in order that the nations will be blessed in him. You know what this teaches us? This teaches us that the blessings of the nations have something to do with, it is directly connected with justice and judgment performed by Abraham's children. If Abraham's children do not do justice and judgment, then the blessing will not come to the nations. Justice and judgment now. Now, it's another fallacy that we want to entertain for those of us who want to know real history. We must, I won't say entertain. In other words, I would argue, let's debunk this fallacy. And this is something that I think we all, I know I experienced it coming up through the Israelite community, is that all of the nations have their land, everybody have their land. It's only the Israelites who been enslaved, they don't have their land. The Chinese have their land, the European have their land, the African have their land. And you know, this is the argument. See, now there's so many when one present that argument, I could say it too, because I'm in my late teens, early 20s. I was under that impression as well. And why? Is because I was grossly ignorant on history and the nuances and and manifestations, different manifestations in societies, how it looks. When what do I mean by this? In other words, you have the Africans in their land. You have the Europeans in their land. They're in their land, but they don't have possession of their land. So theoretically, you can say they have their land because they're there. But in essence, they really don't, because their land is owned by another. They don't have right to it. So they may be there, but they don't have right to it. So it's similar to Samuel, 1 Samuel chapter 8. And turn to 1 Samuel chapter 8. I just want to bring out a point here. 1 Samuel chapter 8. Now, Samuel, he's speaking to the Israelites, but it's something he said there about the growth of the feudal system in Israel.
What verse?
Samuel chapter 8. Bear with me a moment. Samuel chapter 8. And let's start at, he's saying, this is the manner of the kings that will reign over you. And let's start at verse 11.
This is the book of 1 Samuel chapter 8, verses 11. It reads, "And he said, This will be the manner of the king that shall reign over you. He will take your sons and appoint them for himself, for his chariots, and to be his horsemen, and some shall run before his chariots. And he will appoint him captains over thousands, and captains over fifties, and will set them to ear his ground, and to reap his harvest, and to make his instruments of war, and instruments of his chariots."
Now we get into this in other teachings, but here simply Samuel is talking about the framework, the building of the framework of feudalism. But I want you to skip down to verse 16.
Verses 16, "And he will take your men servants, and your maid servants, and your goodliest young men, and your asses, and put them to his work."
Yes.
Verses 17, "He will take the tenth of your sheep, and ye shall be his servants."
Now in the Hebrew, that's slaves. Now he summed up with slaves. You're gonna be in your own land as slaves. So if you look at what he's saying, you're gonna lose your land, you're gonna be taxed, your son's going to be conscripted. That means they're gonna be put in forced military service. You're going to be forced to the duties of the king and his nobles. Ultimately, Samuel explained, you shall be slaves, but you in your own land. But guess what? You won't have no right to it. So, what we have throughout the nations of the world, we have to ask the critical question. You talk about those who are oppressed, and the white man did this, the white man oppressed. Look, it's the ruling class that did it. Okay? It's a struggle between rich and poor, oppressed and oppressor. And this is what we want to show you today. I am mentioning this because you're going to have some Chinese have their land. I'm here to tell you the vast majority of the Chinese do not have right to the land. It is owned by aristocrats. And it's the same story in Africa. It is the same story in Europe. Since we are commonly taught about the white man, this is what we're going to examine today. Okay. So now, when we talk about just judgment, because remember, Abraham's children must exercise justice and judgment. Every man will be awarded according to his deeds. Now, to say that every white man is the oppressor is like saying every black man is a crook. It's foolishness. Okay. But at the end of the day, when you look at the percentage of those who own and oppressed, is always a small percentage. Always a small percentage. All right. Now, we see here in Genesis, read that for me again. Genesis 18, verse 17 and 18. Then we're going to move forward.
Verses 17, and it reads, And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do,
Mm-hmm.
seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him.
Now think about it. You got to think carefully. And I'm going to read you. We're going to read some history today that hopefully will bring more clarification on why the nations need Abraham's children in order to be blessed.
Hey,
And
brother
it's
Judah.
not this pseudo knowledge we've been hearing. Somebody say something?
Yeah, can I come in right quick?
Come on in, bro.
Shalom to you and everybody on the panel.
No.
And down in the audience, shalom to y'all. Hey, now just from those two passages right there, from that
Mm-hmm.
Genesis 18 and that First Samuel's 8, that that shows how this feudal order was not even a part of Israel's fiber. That wasn't even a part of us. And before we even entered in and dwelled and leapt into that type of life, he even warned us through the prophet. Like, you have a job to do according to Genesis 18. How can you do your job inside of a feudal order? As all those confectionaries, as those who the men taken on the front line and put on the front line, as the
Conscripted.
people, yep, as the people who are giving their land up, and those who are going to have to pay 10% to the king, ask them, is that a blessing? It's,
Good point. Good point.
it's impossible for that to be a blessing. So therefore, that can't be a part of the Genesis 18. And for those who think that that's just going to be to the other nations, the role's going to flip. No, the
Yeah,
whole feudal system has to go in order for the blessing upon everybody upon the earth to be brought out. I just want to bring that out. I yield.
I appreciate that. Yeah, because it's just downright. I mean, at the end of the day, it's one thing to be ignorant, and then it's just something else to be stupid. And at the end of the day, that's stupid to say that the salvation is plantation. That's just that's stupid. That's it don't even it don't even if you read in the Bible or you ask a layperson, they will know that don't make no sense. You see, that don't make no sense. But we're going to look at it to see whether what the Bible is saying is so, or whether what these guys running around here call themselves Israelites are saying. And they got to do a whole lot of twisting and turning. And I watched them through the years do a whole lot of twisting and turning, from trying to make that chart legitimate to turning Cornelius into a Israelite. They got to do a whole lot of hopping and jumping. And one thing I know is that they really don't like to deal with the teachings of the Torah too much. But we're going to look at some of this today. And again, if any of them decide to enter into the room, be my guest and we will invite you to the stage. Have no fear. If you want something to say, we will give you the time to say it. Now, what we have here is go to Acts chapter 13, because I've seen one of them butcher this up real well. You know, this doctrine where they say Israel are the Gentiles, and that is true to a certain extent. And what I mean by that is that you must look at the context of the passage. Now, they went here in Acts chapter 13. We want to go here too, but we're going to read a little bit more than what they read. Acts chapter 13, starting at verse 43. This is when the elder and apostle Saul was teaching, and he was sent to the nations. And once you understand this, even from a social political perspective, and stop reading this like a Hollywood book. And I notice a lot of those guys, you know, they in the Hollywood thing. You know, they watch a lot of TV. I even see a lot of their remakes of how they understand the biblical passages. In one sense, they talk about the white man, but then all of these spaceships and chariots that the creator is supposed to return in look like some damn ships I seen in the Twilight Zone when I was growing up. I mean, are they really that make? You understand what I'm saying? I mean, it get to be ridiculous. They look like Marvel characters. Okay, if that's how it is when the creator manifests himself, then guess what? Brother Judah was wrong. But I'm going to tell you today that it's hard pressed to believe that these images they show on us, these spaceships flying around, they talking about his chariots, it's hard to believe as a Bible student that's true. Okay? That's true. Now, what I am saying also is that they don't continue to read the text. They're really not giving the listener the full text. Now, let's look at this text today. Let's look at it today. Acts 13. When you get Acts 13, start reading at verse 43 for me, please.
Verse 43, and it
Uh,
reads, Now when the congregation was broken up, many of the Jews and religious proselytes followed Paul and Barnabas, who speaking to them persuaded them to continue in the grace of God.
Notice carefully. Go ahead.
And the next Sabbath day came almost the whole city together to hear the word of God.
Uh huh.
But when the Jews saw the multitudes, they were
Yes.
filled with envy
Uh
and
huh.
spake against those things which were spoken by Paul, contradicting and blaspheming.
All right. Pay attention now. Go ahead.
Verses 46. Then Paul and Barnabas waxed bold and said, It was necessary that the word of God should first have been spoken to you.
To
But
who? It was. Listen carefully. Read that first part again for me.
verses 46. Then Paul and Barnabas waxed bold and said, It was necessary that the word of God should first have been spoken to you.
You see that word first? First spoken to who? The
Jews.
Israelites, right? The Jews, the Israelites. And we're gonna fix it. Wait, well, that was the southern kingdom. We're gonna clear that up too. First, we see here that it was first spoken to them first. You know how they like to say salvation is only for Israel? Show me that text. Show me that text. I got $1,000 standing. You show me the text that reads verbatim. Salvation is only. You know that's that big old word, only. Show me that because that changes the entire context.
Hey, let me hop in right there though, brother
Uh
Judah,
huh. Go
real
ahead.
quick. Now, you're not gonna find that verbatim, but what you will find, which includes other nations, but Romans 11:26. After all of the Gentiles and stuff have been grafted in, things like that, it said he removed some of the natural stock branches so the Gentile branches could be drafted in. But at the end, he said, and so all Israel shall be saved. Now,
Yeah.
I understand that to mean that the blessing of the nations have come and that all nations will be saved under the banner of Israel. That's how I see it. Now, if I'm
Uh-huh.
wrong, I could be wrong, but you're not going to find the way that they put it, the context in which they stated that only the Israelites going to be saved. No, you're going to be saved under the order given to Abraham. And in
Right.
order
But
to be part of that, you have to come into the house.
that's true. And there's a big difference between the word all and only.
Right, right.
Big difference. You can't even confuse the two because all don't exclude. So when we saying only, that's important. You like to put that one in there. But they're going to have a problem with the text. Now we see here that it was necessary that the word of Elohim would first be spoken to you, the Jews. We seen that? Let's continue, my brother.
But seeing ye put it from you, and
Uh-huh.
judge yourselves unworthy of everlasting life,
Here it come. They can't wait for me to read this because they got me on this one. Go ahead.
lo, we turn to the Gentiles.
And those are Gentile speaking Israelites. That's what they tell us, isn't it? Okay.
Yes, sir.
He said, behold, we turn to the Gentiles. All right. Let's continue to read it now so we can read the entire thing so we know where Saul is making reference to.
Verses 47. For so hath the Lord commanded us, saying,
Uh-huh.
I have set thee to be a light of the Gentiles, that thou shouldest be for salvation unto the ends of the earth.
Now keep in mind that the light is the light to the Gentiles is in association with their salvation. You are a light so you can be the salvation unto the ends of the world. Now, we have some that say, well, this is just the Israelites who were in the Greek culture. All right. Now, guess who? Now you know where we got to go. We have to go to Isaiah 49, where Paul was quoting from. Let's go to Isaiah 49 and keep your marker here in Acts 13. And let's see if Saul, our elder, the apostle and teacher, let's see if he can clear this up for us. Because I see they read Acts and they didn't even read the entire verse. One of the guys out of New York. And he was back there from the early days too. And I noticed, I said, wow, he didn't finish reading it. And God knows he didn't even go back to Isaiah where Saul was quoting. Now, Isaiah 49, when you get to Isaiah 49, I want you to start reading at verse 3. Isaiah 49 and verse 3.
Verse 3, and it reads, and said unto me, thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified.
That's why Saul was explaining the creator. Hold your marker there and go right back to that Acts 13. And you notice the wording with the apostle Paul said, for God hath commanded us, for so hath the Lord commanded us, saying, verse 47.
Verse
You see that?
47,
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
for so hath the Lord commanded us, saying, I have set thee to be a light of the Gentiles.
Now, when Paul is making reference to us, who is he speaking to? The Israelites, the Jews, right?
Yes, sir.
So have he commanded us, him being an Israelite, correct?
Correct.
To be a light unto the nations. Am I right so far? Am I adding anything?
No, sir. No, sir.
Oh, okay. So let's go back here. You are my servant, O Israel. So this is confirming what Saul was arguing. Us. He's an Israelite. You are my servant, O Israel. And I'm not addressing the Yehoshua Mashiach matter. I'm not dealing with that today. So if anyone have any questions on that, we address that too. But right now I'm making another point here. So let's go back to that Isaiah 49 and just where you left off, he said, listen, you are my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified. Is that so? Verse 3.
Verses 3, and said unto me, thou art my servant, O Israel, in whom I will be glorified.
Continue.
Then I said, I have labored in vain. I have spent my strength for naught and in vain. Yet surely my judgment is with the Lord, and my work with my God.
Yes.
And now, saith the Lord, that formed me from the
No,
womb to be his
notice carefully. And now saith Jehovah that formed me from the womb. Yes, sir. Go ahead.
servant,
Yes.
bring Jacob again to him.
Now, wait, to bring not just Judah, but to bring Jacob. This signifying the 12 tribal confederacy. To bring Jacob again unto him. So we know Israel was called to bring Jacob again to him. That means the lost tribes of Israel, right? To bring them back unto him. And what else?
Though Israel be not gathered,
Yes. Continue.
yet shall I be glorious in the eyes of the Lord, and my God shall be my strength.
Continue.
And he said, it is a light thing that
Wait a
thou,
minute. Read this slow. He said, it's no big deal. It's a light thing. For what?
that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob,
To raise up just the southern kingdom.
to raise up the tribes of Jacob.
So we can all agree in this room that he's talking about the entire 12 tribal confederacy. To raise up. It's a light thing to raise up the tribes of Jacob. Uh-huh.
And to restore the preserved of Israel.
And it's a light thing for you to regather the lost tribes. It's a light thing for you to regather the Israelites who's in the Greek culture, who's in the Samaritan culture, who's in the Asian culture, because we have teachings to show you they went from the Levant of the Mediterranean all the way to the coast of China. Oh, it's a light all the way down into India, up into the Russian territories, and eventually all the way to the west, North, South, Central America. It's a light thing. That's no big deal for you to raise up the tribes of Israel. So we see, according to this context, he addressed gathering Israel first.
That's a great point. Hallelujah. A great point.
Praise the Almighty. Now, after he gathered Israel, what happens? Go
I,
ahead.
I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles.
He gonna do what? Now, wait a minute. He also you also, now remember, the light leads to the salvation. And this is what Paul was quoting. Man, to raise up the 12 tribes of Israel and bring them back to the fold is a light thing. I'm gonna use you to do something bigger. You will be a light to the nations. Thus, bringing us back to Genesis what? 18, aren't we?
Yes, sir.
And you, Abraham, all nations of the earth are gonna be blessed. See, you got to do a lot of twisting and turning and making up your own stuff. You know, I know years ago they come to the table talking about Esau, the white man. Listen, I don't have to go through a whole bunch of damn genealogies with you, because you also saying that the white man the devil. I'm telling you what they said to our face. They run up in the school up here in upstate New York one time, and they want to tell us that the white man is Cain, and Cain is he was reincarnated in Esau. And our question is, what you say the white man Cain? Well, let's get Cain across the flood. They couldn't get Cain across the flood, so they had to introduce a new word into our conversation. You hear me? They had to introduce a new word, and that new word was, we have to bring reincarnation to you then. Man, it's time for you to leave the premises. That's it. That's all it is. It's time for you to get back in your Chevy and leave. Okay? Now, if we're going to discuss some Bible, we have to discuss the Bible. Now, this stuff works for people who, they novice. They haven't heard anything. But for those of us who's been reading and who's sincerely searching, this stuff won't make sense. The stuff they saying don't make no damn sense. Now, we see clearly here in Isaiah 49, he's going to raise up the tribes of Israel. And read that verse again about the nations.
Verses 6. And he said, It is a light thing that thou shouldest be my servant to raise up the tribes of Jacob and to restore the preserved of Israel. I will also give thee for a light to the Gentiles, that thou mayest be my salvation unto the end of the earth.
Okay. So you can be his salvation. Now you see in Acts chapter 13 what Paul was making reference to when he was making reference to the Gentiles. He was making reference to the nations because he was speaking in the context of Isaiah 49, the nations. Okay. Now that shouldn't be hard. That really shouldn't be difficult if we believe the Torah. Let's go into Leviticus chapter 19. Leviticus chapter 19. And let's see something here. Let's go into the book of the law. Now, this is Israel coming out of the land of Egypt. And the Bible specified that there was a mixed multitude with them. And I remember years ago asking this teacher, and that back then he called himself Nathaniel Alaga. That's what he called himself back then. And I remember I asked him personally. When the Creator was speaking in the wilderness, he was speaking to the nation of Israel, and they also had a mixed multitude. What's that about? And he told me Moses and the Creator wasn't talking to them. Okay, that's what you say. All right, that's what you saying. Now, let's go notice something. Now, the mixed multitude signifies strangers. That's who was among Israel, a multitude of strangers. Now, if we go to Leviticus chapter 19 and we start somewhere around verse 33 or 34, let's see what we have here. Let's start at verse 33.
Verse 33, and it reads, And if a stranger sojourn with thee in your land, ye shall not vex him.
Wait a minute, you should not do what?
Ye shall not vex him.
Oh, you shouldn't put them on your plantation. But wait, they say that, well, we go into the book of Leviticus chapter 25, and they talk about the hewers of wood and drawers of water. See, we won't leave that out too. And that's why it becomes very, very important for us to understand the different usages of the word stranger. And I couldn't leave that out. Now, he said, You shall not vex the stranger. Okay. In other words, we're not supposed to oppress him. But what shall you do for the stranger?
Verse 34, But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you. And
Well,
thou,
he shall be what?
but
He
the
shall be what? Like one born among you.
but the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you.
Continue.
And thou shalt love him as thyself. For ye were strangers in the land of Egypt. I am the Lord your God.
You don't vex him because you were vexed in Egypt. You were oppressed in Egypt. And the stranger that would like to sojourn among you or join into the 12 tribal confederacy, you shall not vex him. You shall do what? Love him. And not just love him. How are you supposed to love him? Now remember, they eschew this and say, you love, because I don't know. I don't know the psychology. They paint everything with one brush. I don't know if they do it on purpose or by mistake. But all of a sudden now, when we try to clarify, we're talking about love those who are righteous in any nation. And see, they don't understand it that way. They don't process it that way. So I don't know, if we're going to study the Bible, it takes a certain level of comprehension. That's in studying anything. Now you tell me how many ways you can understand that verse. The stranger that dwelleth with you shall unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself. For you were mistreated in the land of Egypt. Now, I am going to the Torah to show you that Peter or Simon did not break from Torah tradition. He did not break from Torah tradition. And so we go into Leviticus, and carefully, we're going to look at this. We're in Leviticus chapter 19, correct? Let me just pull this up
Right.
real quick so I can throw some numbers at you so you can look this up yourself here in Leviticus chapter 19. And I want to put some numbers there for you so we can understand who we're making reference to here, because we're going to begin to make a differentiation with stranger. Some strangers will be citizens, some strangers will not be. Everyone all the strangers who dwelled in the land of Israel, or whoever Israel conquered, they all did not want to join the 12 tribal confederacy. They all didn't want to be citizens. And so there were sanctions against some of them. Some of them could not eat the Passover, according to Exodus chapter 12. They couldn't. They wasn't citizens. If they wanted to be a citizen and join in the covenant, then they would circumcise themselves, according to Exodus chapter 12. And then they will draw nigh and eat of the Passover. Now, I'm not going to read that today unless someone want me to show them right off the bat. But right now, I'm just making that reference so we can, I give you the heads up on how the word stranger is used. Now, in this text, stranger, you shall love the stranger that dwells among you. This is 16:16 ger. And everywhere you read ger, the ger, it signifies not just a foreigner, but the ger is used in the context of a foreigner who have joined themselves to the covenant of Israel. Okay? So even though it means stranger, but when you read ger or 16:16, that stranger is used as a, or signifies one who have joined the covenant. But then you have another stranger. There's several words for it, actually. And the one who would draw the wood, hewer of the water, they're not ger. They're not even citizens. It's a total different word. So either they use goyim or they use different words. All right. So with that being said, you shall love the stranger. Is that what you read?
Yes, sir.
Because the creator loved the stranger. All right. Now I want you to read something else. Now we got the stranger on deck. We got to love him as ourselves. Not just love him, but we got to love him as ourselves. How you like that? Now, what we want to do is go into Deuteronomy chapter 23. Let's put someone else on deck. Esau. And I'm not here to go back and forth about Esau, the genealogy. But God willing, we'll probably be doing the teaching on Esau and the collapse of Idumea. And sort of hopefully we could put some of these so-called texts that they have been putting out there in proper context as well. But today I would just like to go to this Deuteronomy 23, starting at verse 7.
Oh, 23, not 3, 23. I'm sorry. Excuse me 1 second.
Mhm.
23 in verses 7, you said, Elder?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Excuse me for that. I'm sorry. This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 23 and verses 7. Excuse me. Thou shalt not abhor an Edomite, for he is thy brother. Thou shalt not abhor an Egyptian, because thou wast a stranger in his land.
Now, what abhor mean?
Hatred.
Should not hate him. So you shall love the stranger. Edom was your brother. You shall love him and the Egyptian, but it fits the Bible narrative. You can't paint everyone with one brush. Every man, according to the text, will be judged according to their deeds. That is what the text clearly says. Every man shall be judged according to their deeds. Now, seeing that the stranger was there, and I remember this so called Israelite told me a lie many years ago, and I told you what he said tonight. Oh, he wasn't talking to them. Well, if he wasn't talking to them, why will we read this? Let's go, if you will, to Numbers chapter 15. Numbers chapter 15. And when you get to Numbers chapter 15, I would like for you to start reading at verse 14.
Verse 14, and it reads, "And if a stranger sojourn with you, or whosoever be among you in your generations, and,
Yes,
and will offer an offering made by fire of a sweet savor unto the Lord, as ye do, so he shall do."
continue.
Verse 15, "One ordinance shall be both for you of the congregation, and also for the stranger that do sojourneth with you."
Now, why would he sit up here and tell me that the Creator wasn't talking to the strangers? He making it clear here is one law for all, right? Why
Correct.
wouldn't he be talking to them? Because we know he was. It's like it's to a time. I'm putting this out here for people just for the record. All right. We don't spend a whole lot of time on this unless people cross our path and want to talk about it. But I'm putting this out here for the record because at the end of the day, it's so many biblical texts. I mean, it's so many, and the narrative is unbroken from Genesis to Revelation that shows that these arguments about there is no salvation for the nations, salvation is only for Israel, it is just it's just totally outside biblical narrative. All right. Now, what verse you stop at in that particular passage?
At verses 14. No, excuse me, what you call it? At verse 15.
Continue all the way down to 16.
Okay, so I'll read 15 over again. One ordinance shall be both for you of the congregation, and also for the stranger that sojourneth with you, an ordinance forever in your generations. As ye are, so shall the stranger be before the Lord.
How you like that? As you are, so shall the stranger be. So if the stranger do wickedness, he shall suffer the consequences. If the strangers walk in justice, then the stranger shall reap the blessings. So if he follow Abraham, and if Abraham's children do what's right and walk in the Torah and magnify the Torah and bring justice to the world, and the strangers join on to that, thus it will be filled in Abraham, all nations will be blessed. All who among the nations who join unto Abraham. This is the context of what he's arguing. Okay. Any questions or comments before we go forward? Any questions or comments? Uh-huh. And if you are trying to say something, make sure your mic is unmuted. All right. Now, I believe the next text, I want to stay in the Torah a little bit. And there, I want you to go to, wait, he says, so as you are, so the stranger shall be before Elohim. Is that what we learned just now?
Yes, sir. Verses 16 also reads, "One law and one manner shall be for you and for the stranger that sojourneth with you."
All right. Now let's go to, and he said, as you are, so shall the stranger be before me. And we're talking about foreigners. We're talking about Gentiles, foreigners, those who are not of the Israelite stock. I mean, we know Abraham, that's like one of our comrades and sisters brought out one. Listen, Abraham was ready to give his entire inheritance to what you would call a stranger, Eliezer. But I understand the sentiment. You know, a lot of our people have been brutalized in this captivity. Okay, and it has caused a lot of resentment. See, but the Bible is supposed to straighten us out, and we can't bring our attitudes to the text. What we have to do is read the text and let the text form our attitudes. And, you know, like I said, I was talking to the brother who's reading for me, comrade who's reading for me. Listen, if you was to ask them about Brother Judah or Emil, man, back when I was in high school, they had never dreamed that I'd be saying these words. Ever. They'll do a double take. So the history, I understand what's happening, but then I learned more about it. And now I have to go and yield to what the text. I don't have no problem with it because the more I have learned is liberating. Okay. And you begin to find out the struggles of all peoples. And what I have found here is that the Lord or Jehovah, he looks at Israel and the stranger. As Israel is, so shall the stranger be before him. If the stranger walk in righteousness and Israel, as Israel does, then they're going to reap the benefits. And in fact, I'm going to read that to you. But as Israel is, so shall the stranger be before me. One law for all. Now, Deuteronomy, still in the book of the law, Deuteronomy chapter 10. Deuteronomy chapter 10, and start reading when you get it at verse 17. Deuteronomy chapter 10 and verse 17. And we're going to get into some history too, because what helped me was when I began to learn the history of the nations. See, the average person have not learned the history of the nations. The average person have learned the history of the aristocrats. That's what we've learned because they have had the power and finance to write history. So in our textbooks, what we've seen on TV, the vast majority of documentaries, the books written, it's written from an aristocratic perspective. So that's what you read about, the brutality of the aristocrats and how they try to justify it. But when you start to read the history of people, the common people who had a voice and began to voice their or write their struggles, then we get both sides of the story. But right now, let us see what the Elohim of Abraham had to say about the stranger. He already told Israel to love the strangers yourself. Is that what we read?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then he said, as Israel is, so shall the stranger be before him. Did we read that also?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now let's read Deuteronomy chapter 10 and let's start reading at verse 17.
Verse 17, and it reads, For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty and a terrible, which regardeth not persons, nor taketh reward.
Mm-hmm. Go ahead.
Verse 18, He doth execute the judgment of the fatherless and widow,
Yes, sir.
and loveth the stranger,
He does what?
and loveth the stranger.
Now he done already told Israel to love the stranger, and the master said, be perfect like your father is in heaven. You understand? So, yes, if he's telling us to, he does too. And not only do he love them, he demonstrates his love by doing what?
And giving him food and raiment.
Go ahead.
Love ye therefore the stranger, for ye were strangers in the land of Egypt.
All right, all right, all right, all right. Here we have the Torah teachings. The Torah teachings are the foundations of what we're going to read when we get down to Simon and Saul and the rest of them. So far, we realize this isn't far-fetched because when we read the prophetical writing of Isaiah, it let us know it is a light thing to bring again the tribes of Israel. It's a light thing for you to bring again the tribes of Jacob that had fallen. But you shall be my salvation unto the ends of the earth. Thus, Genesis 18 says what? Read that for me again. You know that's our favorite text. I know the Western Christian, they like to quote John 3:16 for Christ so loved the world. Here at this school, we like that too. But we also like this one. Go back to Genesis chapter 18 and read verses 17 and 18 for me, please.
Verses 17, and it reads, And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do?
No, he ain't gonna hide it. Go ahead.
Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him.
Hallelujah. All the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. All the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him. As Israel is, so shall the stranger be. As Israel spread and the doctrines of justice and judgment spread throughout the world, all among the nations who want to do justice and judgment, they will join on to the 12 tribal confederacy. thus bringing about their blessing by way of Abraham. But beware. Let's go to Deuteronomy chapter 27. You want to get this right now. You want to get this right. Let's see what the Father said under the first covenant. And it is still binding the same words under the renewed covenant. Deuteronomy chapter 27, verse 19.
This is the book of Deuteronomy, chapter 27 and verses 19, and it reads, "Cursed be he that perverteth the judgment of the stranger."
How you like that? You got to be careful. Cursed be ye who perverteth the justice deserved to the stranger. And you're going to say that, oh, his salvation, he's going to be under your boot and you're going to oppress him. Sound like perversion to me. Sound like you are going to treat them just like the Egyptians treated you. When we see the biblical narrative, after he finished saying how to treat the stranger, he gave them remembrance. Remember how you was treated in the land of Egypt. So thus, therefore, love the stranger as yourself. How you want to be treated. That's how you treat the stranger. Is that what we read today? Am I making that up?
No, sir. No, sir.
We didn't have to go through a whole bunch of twisting and turning for that, did we?
Nope, just all in the laws.
All in the law. We didn't have to go make nothing up. See, I don't have to make anything up about Cornelius being an Israelite. I don't have to make anything up about Ruth and them coming out having to be Israel. We don't have to do none of that.
We don't have a private interpretation.
We don't have no right. We don't have no private interpretation. So when we read what Paul was saying, Saul was saying in Acts, yes, it was necessary to go to Israel first. It's a light thing to bring y'all back. Y'all rebelled, so we turn it to the nation. Speaking of him and Barnabas and the rest of the brothers who was commissioned or dispatched, but they fulfilling the text. You shall be my witnesses, my light unto the ends of the world. Because as Israel is, so shall the stranger be. And you shall love him because the Creator said he loved him too, didn't he? Now you go ahead and let somebody else tell you different. And they sitting up here talking about they read the Bible. They quoting from the Bible. You go ahead and believe that stuff if you want to. Okay? But I tend to believe the Torah. I believe that. Now he said, cursed is that one, right? Is that what he said? Cursed is the one that perverted the judgment of the stranger. Is that what you read?
That's what I read.
All right, now I want you to go to another prophet. I want you to go to the prophet Malachi. We're going to go to Malachi, the 3rd chapter. So the questions need to be, well, what is the blessing of the stranger? But as long as you're looking at Israel as a religious group, you don't know. It's abstract. You can't give no answer. That's why you can give this ridiculous saying, his salvation will be on a plantation. That's stupid. Now, if I'm wrong by saying that, forgive me if I'm wrong. Do I think I'm wrong right now? Me saying it? No, because it's one thing to be ignorant. It's something else to just be downright stupid. That's stupid. You know damn well if you was in the other position, how in the heck you gonna sit up? Your salvation will be on the plantation. That sound like the dogma from from them clowns who the aristocratic class want to say they saved you from the jungle. See, they brought you to civilization. You didn't accept that. You knew that was ridiculous, and you're gonna sit up here and let somebody talk about some plantation salvation. Man, these people playing around here. And that's why we got to get into some real stuff. And the stuff that I'm presenting to you today, we're going to go into history. I want to go in and show you why and how. Now, I'm going to take the time to go into history because the Bible deals with real time. So since we deal with social political perspective, those of you who are familiar with the school, you know what we get into. But those of you who not, we take the time to go into the social environment of Abraham in Ur of the Chaldees. We go into the social environment of the ancient world, and it began to reveal to us why the nations needed a blessing anyway. Then when we learn the call of Israel, then it makes even more sense since we have learned the social environment of the nations the call of Israel to bring justice and equity and judgment to the earth, thus bringing forth peace, in which the Hebrews call Jerusalem. But it cannot happen without justice first. All right. So we go into this social environment. So for those of you who do stick around, I'm going to go into a little bit of history so you can understand the social environment of the nations. And now we have to make a differentiation between the ruling class history and the history of the common man. Malachi chapter 3. Malachi chapter 3 and verse 5. Malachi chapter 3. We are seeing curse. In the book of the law, the father stood up, curses the man, curses the person that deprived the stranger of his right. And then Malachi chapter 3 at verse 5, what does it say?
It reads, "And I will come near to you to judgment,
Yes, sir.
and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers
Uh-huh.
and against the adulterers
Continue.
and against false swearers and against those that oppress the hireling in his wages, the widow and the fatherless, and that turn aside the stranger from his right, and fear not me, saith the Lord of hosts."
You see, following up with the narrative of Deuteronomy 27, because he done already explained in the Torah as the stranger or the foreigner, as Israel is, if the stranger take hold onto the covenant, you are you're going to collide into some power that will crush you if we don't get this right. And you know why he's saying this. Because if you turn away the stranger from his right, you're going to deprive him of his blessing. And if you deprive him of his blessing when he's searching for it, when he's searching for Abraham, you deprive him of his blessing, guess who you turn into a liar? Who you turning into a liar?
The Elohim.
The Elohim. And he said, as he live, his word shall not come back void. So they could sit around and play these debate games. They could sit around and play their little Bible talk. But here we're looking at the Bible in real life, concrete world, material world. How it did. We are social scientists. We're striving to be even better social scientists because that's what the Bible deals with. It is a book of social science. So therefore, to understand it, we want to understand the historical backgrounds. Then it will become clearer to us what this biblical narrative is all about. If you don't know, you will have this abstract idea of heaven. You will have this abstract idea of blessing. And therefore, you could come up with some concocted argument saying salvation is when the nations are on your plantation. And I think somebody said something real crazy. They was repeating. They said, talking about they gonna what they gonna do to such and such white women and all this other stuff. And I heard some of them say, yeah, their house is gonna be built underground, like in the basements. It's amazing to hear this come from men who claim to be Bible teachers. Now, you see what Malachi said, right? He said that the creator gonna be a swift witness that turn away the stranger from his right. That what we seen there?
That's what we read. And
All right.
against oppress the high
Uh-huh.
wages, the widow and the fatherless, and that turn aside the stranger from his right, and
Well,
fear
let's
me.
see what his right is. Let's go to Isaiah chapter 56. Mm-hmm. Then we're gonna make it up to our master, because this was a problem in our master's day when our master was trying to bring forth this doctrine and get it clear because of the dogma that was put forth that created enmity between the house of Israel and the Gentiles. Back when they were coming out of Babylon, the civil law was instituted by the elders. They meant well, but Peter and them had to abolish that wall of enmity. that law of commandments contained in dogma or ordinances, which separated the Israelite. It was unlawful. That's why when Peter walked in the room, he said, "It is an unlawful thing for one which is a Jew to keep company of one of another nation." Well, we know it's not an unlawful thing according to the Torah because we've been reading. One law shall be for the stranger and that sojourn among you. So what law was Peter making reference to? The same law that Paul said in Ephesians was the law of commandments contained in ordinances, or if you look it up, it means contained in dogma. And when you look it up in Greek, that word dogma is never used for the commandments of Elohim. So that word dogma was used specifically in Ephesians to represent a civil law. And you will find this civil law in the book of Nehemiah, the 9th chapter, when Israel separated from all strangers. And they carried that doctrine for many centuries. Now, what we're looking at here, what is the stranger right? Start at Isaiah 56 and verse 1.
And it reads, Thus saith the Lord, keep ye judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come,
Oh, wait a minute, we talking about that salvation again, huh? Go ahead.
and my righteousness to be revealed. Blessed is the man that doeth this, and the Son of Man that layeth hold on it, that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and keepeth his hand from doing any evil.
Yes, sir. Go
Verses
ahead.
3. Neither let the son of the stranger that hath joined himself to the Lord speak, saying, The Lord hath utterly separated me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, Behold, I am a dry tree. For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant, even until them will I give in mine house, and within my walls a place and a name better than of sons and of daughters.
He said, don't let the son of the foreigner say he can't come and be joined, that he can't be a part of the ger. This here, he's saying, don't let the foreigner say that this is the nakar. Don't let him say he can't be joined. He can become. That's why I say when you read ger have joined unto the covenant, they have circumcised themselves. But he said, listen, don't let the son of the stranger that hath joined himself unto the Lord speak, saying, the Lord hath utterly separated me from his people. Neither let the eunuch say, behold, I am a dry tree. So let the foreigner be joined on to the Creator. Then he said in verse 4, read that again for me.
For thus saith the Lord unto the eunuchs that keep my Sabbaths, and choose the things that please me, and take hold of my covenant, even until them will I give in mine house and within my walls a place and a name better than of sons and of daughters. I will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off.
Here he's making a cry unto the Nikar. That, and this is foreigner. And notice what he's saying now. The foreigner, the Gentiles, those of another nation. He's saying, I will bring them into my place and within his walls, and will give them an everlasting name that shall not be cut off. You know, anyone ever hear of the Rockabites? The Rockabites were foreigners who dwelled among the Israelites, and they dwelt in tents. And the Creator used the Rockabites. He sent Jeremiah down there to talk to the Rockabites and told them to drink wine. And they said, no, our daddy told us not to drink no wine, nor build houses. And the Creator said that the Rockabites, being foreigners, they were more dedicated to the word of their father than Israel was to him. And the Rockabites received the blessing. But it's nothing strange. Look what he says in verse 6.
Verse 6. Also, the sons of the stranger that join themselves to the Lord to serve him and to love the name of the Lord, to be his servants, every one that keepeth the Sabbath from polluting it, and taketh hold of my covenant.
You see how he's specifying? So when we say the stranger, we're not getting off into this stupidity like, okay, it's just an open door, all of them just come in no matter what. That's no. Anyone with a rational mind and intelligent dialogue, no, the text is making reference to the stranger who want to join, who want to be a part of the covenant, who take hold of the Sabbath, who circumcise themselves.
It,
This is
cle-
what he's saying.
it clearly says to be his servants. Then it
To
says
be,
everyone that keep the
that's
Sabbath.
right. Those who take hold onto the covenant to be his servants. And when I'm saying circumcised, I'm making reference to Exodus. I'm not. I understand the argument of Saul, the elder Saul, in Acts 15. Okay, there is no controversy there. Right now, I'm just speaking in the context of the first covenant, the Torah, showing. Listen, man, the stranger had an open door policy. Whoever would take hold on the covenant and not pollute the word of Elohim was welcomed in. Did you finish that verse?
Yes, sir.
All right. Now, this is interesting when we read Malachi. Do not turn now we see the stranger have right to come in, correct? Now go
Correct.
back and read that Malachi again. Malachi chapter 3.
In verses 5.
That's right.
And I will come near to you to judgment, and I will be a swift witness against the sorcerers, and against the adulterers, and against false swearers, and against those that oppress the hireling in his wages, the widow, and the fatherless, and that turn aside the stranger from his right.
He
And
got a right to take hold onto the covenant. He got a right to take hold onto the blessings because in Abraham shall the nations of the earth be blessed. Curses the man that interferes with that. He is a swift witness. Why is he a swift witness? Because he said, curse is the man that interferes with that. Now read that Deuteronomy 27 and 19 for me just to confirm it.
verse 19. Cursed be he that perverteth the judgment of the stranger, fatherless, and widow, and all the people shall say amen.
And all the elders shall say, so be it. How should we deal towards the stranger? We shall love them as ourselves. Is that what we read?
Yes, sir. Let me get that. That was Numbers 15, correct?
No, that's actually should love the strangers ourselves. That should actually be Deuteronomy 10, or you can go, yeah, let's try to Deuteronomy 10. The other one is Leviticus 19.
Okay,
So
Deuteronomy.
whatever one you want to go to, which one you want to go to?
I'm gonna get Leviticus. I got both, but I get Leviticus 19. So I think I'm right there.
Leviticus 19 and 34.
4. Yep. But the stranger that dwelleth with you shall be unto you as one born among you, and thou shalt love him as thyself.
All right. All right. So we did our little Torah portion today. This is our little Torah portion. And we're not finished. But because of the sake of time, we're not looking through a whole lot of text, but we're going to look through a couple of more important ones. So we see, well, they all important. So, but you know what I mean. We see so far that the Torah and the prophets argue that the stranger will become one with the children of Israel. If they take hold onto the covenant, they should receive a blessing. Elohim is no respecter of persons. All right, now I told you that the Israelites had a problem. They had a problem in Yeshua's day. Now look at Yeshua, the Hoshua. Let's go into Luke, the 4th chapter. That's how this is the same spirit that's on these people today. The same spirit that we're about to read about, that evil, wicked, vindictive spirit is on the people today. And if they gonna make it, they gonna have to shake this. They're gonna have to shake that spirit. You know, they get caught up and get a round of applause because people don't understand what's going on. I'm trying to tell you. It's not, it might not turn out well for him. Luke chapter 4, let's start reading at verse 25. Luke chapter 4 and verse 25. Now we done seen through the Torah and the prophets that the Creator say, love the stranger. That's what we've been reading. And what stranger? The one that take hold onto the covenant. Curses the man that deprive him of his rights. Let all the people say amen. Then the Creator said, I will be a swift witness against those that deprive the stranger of his right. All right. Now, we're going to see that the Messiah had to come on the scene because by this time, the civil law was intact by the elders, Ezra and Nehemiah, because they were trying to get the nation together. So that's why they made that decree. But that decree do not trump the Torah. And that's why Peter was told, listen, Peter, what I have cleansed calls no man common. What we find in the book of Acts was none other than the revival of what was taught in the Torah centuries before Peter. But let's go to our master and teacher. He was in the synagogue. He knew the sentiment, and notice what was going on here. Let's chime in. Picture it now. 2,000 years ago, you down in the synagogue with the rest of them. See, you down there, your uncles and cousins and all of them down there, and then you get down there and you know what's been taught. You probably believe it yourself as far as the separation of Israel and the stranger. And then you get this 30-year-old young man come in the synagogue. 30 don't even know where he come from, and those who do know where he come from one of the worst places. Can any good thing come out of where he come from? Think about it now. You down there in the synagogue, and it's about to be some stuff about to go on. He about to kick something going. My grandfather used to say, don't kick dung and it won't stink. And far as these scribes, Sadducees, and Pharisees concerned, the Messiah about to kick some dung. And it's gonna smell good to some, but it's gonna stink to others. Look what they did now. When you get there, let's get right into it.
Verses 25.
Yes, sir.
But I tell you of a truth, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elias, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, when
Uh-huh.
famine was throughout all the land. But unto none of them was Elias sent, save unto Sarepta, a city of Sidon, unto a woman that was a widow.
Wait a minute. All these Israelites, he gonna send them over to the coast of Zidon. Okay. So he's implying he was sent to a foreigner. Okay, well, what else happened now? Because the Messiah didn't stop there now. Go ahead. He says a lot of widows in Israel, but he went to a foreigner. What else we got?
And many lepers were in Israel in the time of Eliseus the prophet, and none of them was cleansed, saving Naaman the Syrian.
They both were saved. She was saved from famine, and he was saved from his ailment. A lot of people in Israel, but he went to foreigners. Now you can argue that this woman was an Israelite, but you're gonna have to do some real twisting to make Naaman be an Israelite, the captain of the guard of the Syrians. Now it says he went to a foreigner, and notice the uproar in the synagogue, same way they act today. Go ahead and read it.
Verse 28. And all they in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath.
Sound familiar, don't it? You go in there and talk about God and did some favors to the strangers before the Israelites. Tell me they're gonna respond the same way because they got the same spirit. They have the same spirit, the same devil sitting on the throne. And not only were they upset, look what they tried to do to him. Go ahead.
Verse 29. And rose up and thrust him out of the city, and led him unto the brow of the hill whereon their city was built, that they might cast him down headlong.
Man,
But
they were so full of the damn devil that when the Messiah began to talk about how the Creator showed mercy and blessings upon the Gentiles, they were ready to throw him. See how deep the evil go? But if they were Torah readers, it wouldn't have been a surprise. The creator said he loveth the stranger and providing food and raiment. That's what he did for the woman with Elijah. Fed her. Full of the devil. Ready to throw the master off the cliff, but he got away from him though. It wasn't the time. He got away from him. Now let's look at this a little bit more. Anybody got any questions or comments before we go forward? I don't see no hands raised. I know some people been jumping in and out. I've been trying to put everybody up on stage. Cause we don't mind it.
No, not really. No questions. It's just amazing to me that some of these brothers and some sisters even think that we are going to place the stranger into chattel slavery as we were in the kingdom. It's amazing
That is
how they come to
amazing.
that
It's
conclusion.
beyond. It's like it's incredible that you could read the Bible and come to them conclusions. But I've come to learn they really don't read it. When I begin to hear the revelations of a lot of the guys who was in One West, you know, back in the 80s, early 80s, they broke off and they began to reveal like what was really going on in them schools. I mean, these guys were captains and held rank. And I remember one argument, one I heard I forget the guy name who began to interview all of these elders. Now, they elders now, you understand. And one of the things they had at their round table when they were critiquing the One West teaching was these high priests. They had so many high priests in the school. I guess at one time they had up to 5 or 6. I know Nashawn remember their names. I don't remember all their names. I just remember what they looked like. And the guy who called himself the comforter, Jermaine Grant, they said at this round table that he pulled up the Book of Mormons to justify the ordaining of high priests. And I know that to be true because I believe the guy name is Robert Dennis. Years ago, we received this book, Robert Dennis, The Truth. And he was from One West. I mean, he pretty much had the entire doctrine of One West in his book. And yes, the Book of Mormon was in there as a reference. So when I heard him say that, I said, hey, that makes sense. Robert Dennis, he used it to establish doctrine. But they were just coming to the realization they were captains. They were in the school, so-called, and they were just coming to the realization that there was only one priest at a time. I'm saying, man, y'all was there back then and y'all wasn't reading the word to know that the Torah said there was only one high priest. But it's a good thing they learned. But what I mean is, why I'm bringing this up is because these people don't study the Bible. They read it and they read the letter of it. And you could quote 20, 30 scriptures. But if those 20 or 30 scriptures are not in context, it's useless to you as far as a message. It's useless. So I have to think about when we do say, man, it's incredible that they even come to this conclusion. But I also have to take into consideration that they really don't really read the book too much. Or they have their script, they have their precept book. And so they can remember the precept book like a robot. Don't really know what it means. Don't really know, you can't go too far in it. And that's the scriptures that they pull out. And then the scriptures they don't know and they not familiar with, someone to bring up. I've seen them plenty of times come up with an interpretation on the fly. They come up with a meaning right then and there and tell you what it means. No, that stuff don't work. Here we got to be Bible students, critical thinking, study text, historical background. We need to study the historical background, diligently study the text. All right. So we just looking at a little bit of it today. You see, they tried to throw the master over the cliff. They got upset at him, didn't they? They tried to throw him over the cliff. Mm-hmm. That's what they tried to do. But Let's look at this. Now, before we go to Peter, I want to go somewhere else. I want to go into the book of Ezekiel, chapter 47. Now, Ezekiel was a priest. Now, Ezekiel knew what he was talking about. Now, either you could believe Moses and Elijah and Malachi, and either we could believe them, the prophets, Moses, Elijah, Malachi, and now what we're about to read in Ezekiel, or you could believe these guys running around here who don't even really know if they Israelites or not. Don't get me wrong now. I believe I'm an Israelite, but at the end of the day, I have to be honest. Now, these cats running around here, they don't really know. They don't really know. But that's another subject. Right now, I want you to go to Ezekiel 47 and start reading at verse 21. Let's look what the prophet Ezekiel say.
Verse 21, and it reads, So shall ye divide this land unto you according to the tribes of Israel. And it shall come to pass that ye shall divide it by lot for an inheritance unto you, and to the strangers that sojourn among you, which shall beget children among you, and they shall be unto you as born in the country among the children of Israel. They shall have inheritance with you among the tribes of Israel.
They shall have an inheritance with you. Now, I'm not like I say. I know the hewers of wood, drawers of water doctrine. I can do that on its own, but I'm gonna give you a hint. Look up the word stranger, and then you will find out. You'll get a good idea what we're talking about. The hewers of wood and drawers of water are those who will not submit to the covenant. It's like a sanction, actually. But you could once you submit, if you decide to submit to the covenant, then you're like one born in the land. And look, those who are those of the stranger or the Gentiles who are like one born in the land, they shall have an inheritance with you among the clans of Israel. Verse 23.
And it shall come to pass that in what tribe the stranger sojourneth, there shall ye give him his inheritance, saith the Lord God.
You shall take away the inheritance.
There shall ye give him his inheritance, saith
You
the
shall
Lord
get
God.
you shall give them the inheritance you want them to have.
There shall ye give him his inheritance, saith the Lord God.
And it shall come to pass that in what tribe the stranger sojourneth.
There shall ye give him his inheritance, saith
Mm-hmm.
God.
All right. Okay. Everybody Bible say that then. Okay. Any questions or comments before we move forward?
Oh, I just wanted to say real quick, and when they try to use the argument of the drawers of water and hewers of stone, it has to be in the context of those that won't submit to the covenant, because if not, then it would contradict all of the prophets and all of out of the law that we read from Leviticus, out of Moses' writings. So, when we put it in context, just common sense would tell you that that's not what that's talking about. You know what I mean? Because if not, you're trying to make God into the author of confusion, and we know that that's not the case. God is not the author of confusion. But I just wanted to say that. That's all.
Thank you. And you're right. He is not the author of confusion. And you said it correctly. We have to look at the narrative. Is once it's just consistent. So when we see the Messiah bringing the poking at them in the synagogue, we see that they got really hostile. And he have a lot of parables. The Good Samaritan is another parable that got them upset. But let's move it to Peter. Let's go to Acts chapter 10. And then once we look through Acts chapter 10, we're going to look through two more texts. And then I want to go back to that Genesis 18, and I want to go into some history and share some history with you so we can put things in context concerning the nations of the world. Okay. And realize how the world really is, and not from understanding the world from the bourgeois aristocratic perspective, which many of us do because that's all we ever had. We don't, that's what's in the school books. So we're going to present some alternative history from the people. Um, so right now, let's go to this Acts chapter 10. We're not going to read all the way through. All right. We're not going to do that because most of us are familiar with the story that Peter at this time, we're going to read a little bit, but Peter was a little hungry and he going to encounter some messengers from one called Cornelius. So let's just get a little bit of, we're going to skip around. Acts chapter 10. I want you to get Acts chapter 10 and start reading at verse 1.
This is the book of Acts, chapter 10, and verses 1. There was a certain man in Caesarea called Cornelius, a centurion of the band called the Italian band. Verse 2. A devout man, and one that feared God with all his house, which gave much alms to the people, and prayed to God always.
Go ahead.
He saw in a vision, evidently about the ninth hour of the day, an angel of God coming into him and saying unto him, Cornelius. And when he looked on him, he was afraid and said, What is it, Lord? And he said unto him, Thy prayers and thy alms are come up for a memorial before God. And now send men to Joppa and call for one Simon, whose surname is Peter. He lodgeth with one Simon, a tanner, whose house is by the seaside. He shall tell thee what thou oughtest to do.
All right. Now he is of the among the Italian band or among the Italian armies, and he sent for Peter. Let's skip down to verse 9.
Verses 9. On the morrow, as they went on their journey and drew nigh unto the city, Peter went up upon the housetop to pray about the sixth hour. And he became very hungry and would have eaten. But while they made ready, he fell into a trance and saw heaven opened and a certain vessel descending upon him, as it had been a great sheet knit at the four corners and let down to the earth.
Now, I know commonly when people read this, they associate the dietary law, but don't have anything to do with diet, the meat diet. But I want you to understand the context of the nations. So remember, this sheet coming down is going to be a sheet of all unclean animals, things that the Israelites did not deal with whatsoever. Now, look at this in the context of the nations. And this is what we have learned when we study this chapter. Now, let's continue to read this.
Verse 12, wherein were all manner of four-footed beasts of the earth, and wild beasts, and creeping things, and fowls of the air. And there came a voice to him, Rise, Peter, kill and eat.
Go
But
ahead.
but Peter said, Not so, Lord, for I have never eaten anything that is common or unclean. And the voice spake unto him again the second time, What God hath cleansed, that call not thou common.
Continue.
This was done thrice, and the vessel was received up again into heaven.
So the thing for the vessel came down 3 times, and then it was received up into heaven. Now, this is a vision now. This is a vision. All right. So 3 times this come down with all manner a vessel, all manner of unclean animals. Peter said, "No, I don't want nothing to do with that." Now, come down 3 times. Now, notice what happens. Continue.
Verse 17. Now, while Peter doubted in himself what this vision which he had seen should mean, behold, the men which were sent from Cornelius had made inquiry for Simon's house, and stood before the gate, and called and asked whether Simon, which was surnamed Peter, were lodged there.
Now, hold on. Now, think about this. The men came. The sheep. I need you to pay attention to this because the sheep come down 3 times. Now you got men approaching Simon the tanner's dwelling, and they're looking for Peter. Now notice carefully. Now remember, the sheep had come down 3 times, and how many men is going to appear? Go ahead and read.
And I'm sorry, I was at verse 19, right? Excuse me, I was at verse 19. Okay. While Peter thought on the vision, the Spirit said unto him, Behold, 3 men seek thee.
Now, what the Bible is teaching us thus far, I will argue, is that each man represented the sheep. Come down 3 times, 3 men had come. Now, why am I bringing this part out? It's because where is it that the Israelite, where it's written that the Israelites looked at they may have looked at them like among the Gentiles, but where was it that they didn't even want to deal with them? So what we find here, the sheep came down, it was so despicable that Peter said, I don't want nothing to do with it. Now, why would Peter feel this way towards the lost sheep of Israel? When Acts chapter 1, it was the decree. In fact, hold your marker there. We got to read that. Acts chapter 1, notice the commission. What they were dispatched to do in Acts chapter 1. Hold that marker in Acts 10. But let's see, because Peter shouldn't have had this attitude towards the Israelites. Why? Because it is. Acts chapter 1. And let's start reading at verse, hold on, Acts chapter 1. And let's start reading at verse 6.
And it reads, When they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? And he said unto them, It is not for you to know the times or the seasons which the Father hath put in his own power.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
But ye shall receive power after that the Holy Ghost is come upon you, and ye shall be witnesses unto me, both in Jerusalem and in all Judea and in Samaria and unto the uttermost part of the earth.
Right. Now, we're not going to read Matthew 28, but it's the same commission. Go into all the world and teach. Now, if the argument is that they were supposed to go recover the lost tribes of Israel, why would these 3 men represent unclean sheets? The
Boom.
only thing that Peter did not want to deal with were foreigners. Now, he's going to say it himself. So let's go back to Acts chapter 10. 3 men come to the door. And notice what Peter began to say.
Verses 20.
Yes.
Arise, therefore, and get thee down, and go with them, doubting nothing, for I have sent them. Then Peter went down to the men which were sent unto him from Cornelius, and said, Behold, I am he whom ye seek. What is the cause wherefore ye are come? And they said, Cornelius the centurion, a just man, and one that feareth God, and of good report among all the nation of the Jews, was warned from God by an holy angel to send for thee into his house, and to hear words of thee.
So he was sent to hear words from you. Let's skip down to verse 25.
And as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him, and fell down at his feet, and worshipped him. But Peter took him up, saying, Stand up, I myself also am a man. And as he talked with him, he went in, and found many that were come together.
Watch this.
And he said unto them, Ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company, or come unto one of another nation.
Stop right there. Where's that at? Where's that written? You see how I use the word? It is an unlawful thing.
Mm-hmm.
People never think about that. Where is it written that it is an unlawful thing for one which is a Jew to keep company of one of another nation?
Hey, have you ever read that in any extra biblical source? Because I haven't, and
What
like
Torah?
that's and I huh?
It's not in the Torah, right?
Right. It's not in the Torah. I,
Uh-huh.
that's no. I've never found that.
Now let's
Well,
find out where he got it from. Nehemiah, hold your marker here. Nehemiah chapter 9. Now, when we're looking at Nehemiah chapter 9, Nehemiah, Ezra, Zerubbabel, these are all the leaders and governors of the nation coming out of Babylon. And they are setting laws and decrees. Now, Paul is going to address this same issue we're reading about right here. At this moment in time, there was a civil decree sent throughout the nation, especially among the southern kingdom. And I want you to read Nehemiah chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. Notice the decree that came from the elders or the government of Israel: Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, and the elders. Notice there what the decree, or as Paul put it, the dogma, which is a man or a civil ordinance.
Verses 9. Well, excuse me, chapter 9, verses 1. Now in the 24th day of this month, the children of Israel were assembled with fasting and with sackcloths and earth upon them. And the seed of Israel separated themselves from all strangers, and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers.
You see what happened there?
They separated themselves from all the strangers. Yes,
From
sir.
all the strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Israel, who made, we read in the book of Nehemiah, this is the elders and the governors in Israel establishing a civil law to separate from all strangers.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with that being said, let's go back. Now, when Peter said it is an unlawful thing, we know that's not in the Torah. It is a civil law. Now, in fact, I want you to go to Ephesians, because sometimes I don't want to lose the thought, but I want to bring it all together. Ephesians chapter 2. Let's look at this briefly. All right, when you get to Ephesians chapter 2, I want to get right to the point actually. Hold on one second. What do verse 14 say? Because I didn't go there yet. But what do verse 14 say?
For he is our peace, who hath made both one, and have
Let's
broken.
go. What that's verse 12?
No, that's verse. You said 14, right?
Yes, I'm sorry. 14. Okay, try verse 12. Let's go up a little higher.
That at that time ye were without Christ, being aliens from the commonwealth of Israel.
At
And,
what time? At who was? The nations. They were aliens. Aliens, foreigners from the commonwealth of Israel. Now watch this. Let's follow this thought. Continue.
and strangers from the covenants of promise. Excuse me, I'm sorry. Having no hope and without God in the world.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
But now in Christ Jesus, ye who sometimes were far off are made nigh by the blood of Christ.
Continue.
For he is our peace, who hath made both one, and have broken down the middle wall of partition between us.
See, the law of commandments or the civil law made by Ezra and Nehemiah created a wall of partition. Now, this is going to line directly up with Acts chapter 10. We just stopped. We're going to go back to Acts 10. But I wanted you to get this thought. I want you to hear this language. He have broken down the middle wall of partition between the foreigners and the Israelites, which was never in the Torah. That's why we went to the Torah first. So he broken down the middle wall of partition. Continue to read this.
And it says, I'm sorry, for verse 14, for he is our peace, who hath made both one, and have broken down the middle wall of partition between us, having abolished in his flesh the enmity, even the law of commandments contained in ordinances, for to make in himself of twain one new man, so making peace.
I want you to remember that. He have made peace. But now he say he have abolished in his flesh the law of commandments contained in ordinances, right?
Right.
And that's where you get a lot of these people talking about, he done away with the laws of Moses. Man, this ain't nothing to do with the laws of Moses. This is the law of commandments contained in ordinances. This is the Greek word dogma, 1378, dogma. An opinion, if you look it up, dogma, these commandments he's making reference to in the dictionary, in the Greek dictionary, 1378, dogma specifically says an opinion, a public decree. Now, did we read an opinion and a public decree in Nehemiah?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let me grab it one more time.
Go ahead.
The book of Nehemiah, chapter 9, and verses 1. Now, in the 24th day of this month, the children of Israel were assembled with fasting and with sackcloths and earth upon them. And the seed of Israel separated themselves from all strangers and stood and confessed their sins and the iniquities of their fathers.
That's right. This was under the instruction of Ezra, Nehemiah, Zerubbabel, and all of the elders who led them out of Babylon. And now, back in Ephesians, read that again. He have broken down a middle wall of partition and have abolished in his flesh the commandments in ordinances,
Verse
dogma sin, or 1378, dogma, which is an opinion and a public decree. When Peter said it is an unlawful thing for one which is a Jew to keep company of one of another nation, he was making reference to that public decree to separate from all strangers. And then what the Spirit tell Peter, listen, Peter, what I have cleansed don't call no man common. And if they were Israelites, Peter never had the sentiment where he didn't deal with Israelites once he was under the Messiah's teaching. But this sheet came down to represent men who Peter did not want to deal with. And then when Peter walked into that room, he said, man, it's an unlawful thing for me to keep company of Jew of another nation. I mean, of one of another nation. Now, wouldn't that be downright ridiculous if he talking to lost Israelites? That wouldn't even make no sense. You're sent to Israel. You knew that from the beginning. Now you in a room with Israelites, and you know, it's an unlawful thing. I can't come under y'all. It was an unlawful thing to keep company of a foreigner, and it was a public decree. Now, he abolished that wall, making peace. Now let's go back to Acts chapter 10. And watch Peter say what we've been saying all night.
verses
Acts
20,
chapter 10. Yeah, Acts chapter 10, yep, and verse 20.
verse 20 or 28.
We're hold on. We didn't go down that far in Acts chapter 10.
Well, yeah, 28 is when he says,
No, I don't want to go down that far. I don't want to let all my goodies out the bag at one time.
I got you, yes, sir.
No,
So,
I'm messing around with you. But where did we leave off at? We left off at verse. He said, "Arise and get up." Right? He told him. Now I know we read verse. We close to 28 actually. Where did we exactly leave off? In fact,
all right,
I think no, we did. You're right.
25, 10 and 25.
10 and 25. Let's do there at that 10 and 25. Let's go there.
verses 25, and it reads, and as Peter was coming in, Cornelius met him and fell down at his feet and worshipped him. But Peter took him up, saying, stand up, I myself also am a man. And as he talked with him, he went in and found many that were come together. And he said unto them, ye know how that it is an unlawful thing for a man that is a Jew to keep company or come unto one of another nation. But God hath shewed me that I should not call any man common or unclean.
Now we know it. Yah Elohim taught us that earlier in this session tonight because we started off with the Torah, didn't we?
Yes, sir.
And when we started off with the Torah, all those who wanted to join themselves unto the covenant of Israel, being of the Gentile and the stranger, Israel is supposed to be the light to them, to lead them to salvation. And they are to be as Israel is before the Creator. Israel is to love the stranger as he loved himself. And the Creator said he even loved the stranger and demonstrating it through providing him with his necessities. So we knew this to be the case. Now we have the Spirit coming to Peter and telling him, because we knew how they felt about the strangers because they ready to throw Yehoshua off the cliff. So we knew how they felt about it. So when Peter walking in the room, he knew the sentiment. Listen, man, he thinking to himself, man, these Israelites find out I've been around a stranger, man, they're going to be ready to take my head. And that's what he rehearsed the matter in Acts chapter 11. But I'm talking too much. Let's finish reading it. Now he said, look, I should not call any man common or unclean. This is what Yahweh Elohim have shown him. Is that right? That was verse 28?
Verse 28, verse 29. Therefore came I unto you without gainsaying. As soon as I was sent for, I asked therefore what intent ye have sent for me.
All right, let's skip down to verse 34. Now, the revelation is coming to Peter. Let's skip down to verse 34.
And it reads, Then Peter opened his mouth and said, Of a truth I perceive that God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him.
Now, doesn't that fit the biblical narrative from the beginning we've been reading all night? This is none other than a summation of the entire narrative starting from Genesis. Read it again for us, please.
Then Peter opened his mouth and said, Of a truth I perceive that God is no respecter of persons, but in every nation he that feareth him and worketh righteousness is accepted with him.
Now, I told you to remember that word peace, what Paul was talking about. Go ahead and read the next verse.
The word which God sent unto the children of Israel, preaching peace by Jesus Christ. He is Lord of all.
Now, y'all see what Paul's talking about in Ephesians? So making peace, abolishing the wall of enmity between the two. So making peace. Now, Peter is showing that the Creator, from all the nations who want to do righteousness, is joined with him. The Creator is no respecter of persons. This is the word of Elohim sent unto the children of Israel, preaching what? Peace by Yehoshua HaMashiach. But I believe this would make even more sense when we understand the mission of Yehoshua HaMashiach. But it might not hold much if you understand this Bible from just a religious perspective. And only thing it has to do with, only thing the message is pertaining to you is just wear fringes and keep the Sabbath day and don't eat no pig and keep the new moons. It probably won't mean much. But if we understand the mission of Yehoshua as the Hamashiach to organize the people to break in pieces the oppressor, to bring forth a doctrine and the teachings throughout the earth that will undermine the oppressive powers of the world, then we will also even understand the necessity and the wisdom of other nations joining on to the 12 tribal confederacy mission. It will make perfect sense when we understand it in real time. But if you read this like people read a Harry Potter book and you just read in the story, you probably won't even get it. You probably won't even get it. Okay. Now, any questions or comments before we move on? Now I've been looking to see if I had any hands raised. I ain't had no hands raised. I have some people coming in, but I'm not trying to ignore the people, but we had a lot of people coming in. If you have any questions or comments, please raise your hand. But then we have people coming in late. So what I would do, we are accessible. And we're ready to discuss this through the grace of God at any moment, any time that He allowed, in season, out of season. It really don't matter. But what we're doing, we're putting this on the table now for our records. So people could look and we'll reference them to take this into consideration. Okay. Now now let's go back to Genesis. Let's go back to Genesis. Because we see this, the middle wall of partition that was broken down was the enmity or the hatred between the nations and the Israelites. The law of commandments that was abolished, if you looked it up, like I told you, the law of commandments isn't making references to the Torah. The law of commandments is the Greek word that law of commandments contained in ordinances, or the instructions contained in the ordinances of a public decree. That's how you will understand what Saul was explaining, because the ordinances is the key to that text in Ephesians. Dogma 1378. So this is defined as an opinion, a public decree, and we found this is what the elders and leaders, the Senate and government in Israel ordained that when they were coming out of Babylon. That's what Peter was making reference to, and we find that that middle wall of partition was broken. So we're going back to the original ancient teachings of the Torah, where the stranger is joined on, and now they are on the road to the blessing. Now let's go read that blessing again. Genesis 18, verses 17 and 18.
And it reads, And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do? Seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him.
All right. Now, before we close, or should I say before I open it up, let's go look and find out why the nations need to be blessed. Now, I want to look at a book. It was by Neil Cameron, and this is. And don't. I know some people may be afraid of the name, but hold on. Don't be afraid. Marxism and the Science of Society by Kenneth Neil Cameron. And I am going here because he gave a historical account of the ancient world. So let's go back to the ancient world and see if we could put this Genesis 18 in context, in some kind of historical context, because he's talking about the nations of the earth being blessed. That's what we're looking at. So here on page 46 of this text, let's see what we can find. Bear with me again. If you have questions or comments, or if you need any clarity, please don't hesitate. Wait, I want page 43, actually. I went too far. Page 43. Now, notice this. Page 43, patterns of the past. And that's where we're looking at the context of Abraham. Let's get his social environment to see where we could place this call of Abraham's children. Patterns of the past. It says civilized societies first grew out of latter farming societies in about 3000 BC in the upper West Asia, North Africa, and Eastern Mediterranean areas, with the main centers in Mesopotamia, Sumer, and Egypt. Now, where did Abraham come from? Ur of the Chaldees. This is the territory of Mesopotamia or Sumer. All right. So we're going way back into the days of Abraham. And we find the main centers of civilization was Sumer or Mesopotamia and Egypt. Now, he continues. He said both centers were of the same general type, namely societies in which irrigated agriculture, operated by peasant labor, and owned the land, was owned, the territory was owned by a few great owners, whom the Bible called Baal. All right. He didn't say that part. I just said that part. He just said it was owned by a few great landowners. So the vast territories of Egypt, the vast territory of Mesopotamia was owned by a few great landowners. It says these landowners, these few great landowners who owned the land more jointly than individually, provided the socio-economic base. This society was therefore, in essence, feudal. For the basis of feudal society is the exploitation of a peasant mass by a great land-owning ruling class. So you say, Brother Judah, why are you reading this? Because we're learning why the nations need a blessing. They were oppressed and exploited by a few great landowners. So Abraham was called. When you have people oppressed and exploited by a few great landowners, you tell me, is there justice and judgment in the earth? I will say no. So I would like for you to read Genesis 18, verses 17 and 18 again for me. Let's see. God is calling Abraham out of a world that is the masses are oppressed by a few great landowners. So now he calling Abraham out of one of those commercial centers, of the Chaldees, and said, listen, Abraham, you're going to have some children that's going to do something about this. Genesis 18 and 18 again for me. Genesis 18, starting at verse 17.
And it reads, And the Lord said, Shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him.
Whoa. See, we got to raise up a people that's going to deliver the masses of the people out of the oppression and exploitation of Baal or the Lords. Now, this is just a glimpse. We get into more of this social science in our other classes, but right now I'm just presenting something that people could follow up with. Now, I'm going to go over to page 73. Follow up with this. It reads, in both Egypt and Sumer, a considerable manufacturing, commercial, and financial structure arose. With money and financial houses, with their branch offices in other countries. Although this commercial system existed within a basically feudal society, it was in itself capitalist, exchanging goods for profit. The slave commercial societies of Greece and Rome differed economically from these earlier feudal societies, mainly in having more concentrated wealth, the result of the greater exploitation allowed by slave labor. So he said mainly the difference between Greece and Rome with Egypt and Sumer is that they gathered more wealth. But how was it built? Off slave labor. Now, who was the slaves? Who are the slave laborers? You're talking Egypt and Sumer, before there was an Israelite. Who were the slave laborers? Were white people slaves? Were white people slaves in Rome? Were white people slaves in Greece? Were African slaves in Egypt? Were African slaves in Babylon? You see, you can't paint it with one brush. The masses of the people have not had access to the land in which they walk upon. They've been robbed. So therefore, the mission of Abraham is appealing to them. If they join with Abraham and Israel to overthrow the oppressors, then they're going to get a blessing. And we talk in our classes more about the blessing. Here, let me read. I got 2 more accounts. I'm going to open it up. I can open it up so somebody could just tell me I know people want to get on some people. I don't know if people on here saying, but if people here, I know people gonna say, man, this is a false prophet and all this other stuff. No, I'm not a prophet. I don't claim to be no prophet. I done seen too many people mess up with prophecies. What I like to do is go into some history. Because if you don't know what you're doing, to repeat it. And I want to go into Black Marxism by Cedric J. Robinson. And let us stay on the subject at hand. If you want to argue about Marxism, we'll do that a little bit later. I read out of a lot of history books. Okay. Last too many years, Reader Digest, Britannica, all that stuff. You understand? When I read out them books, people don't want to sit up here and argue about the authors and all this other stuff. So let us just listen to the information right now. And you can verify it in other places. But this is out of Cedric J. Robinson. Now, this is a so-called Israelite actually right here. And I want to go to page 10. And notice what he began to say. So ancient times, the nations, the masses were subdued by a few great landowners. Abraham's called to change it. Now, how? By enlightening the people of the nations. So let's move down a little bit further from that time. Let's go into the days of that beast with the iron teeth that stumped the residue with his feet. Daniel chapter 7. Let's go into his days, or Daniel chapter 2. Let's find out. Cedric Robinson have a subtitle here: Europe's Formation. All right, so because I said we're gonna look at white people a little bit today. Let's see if they've been born with the golden egg. You understand? Let's see. Because I know if I was a European and all my ancestors suffered, they died in the potato famine. They were oppressed, eating dog's meat, and just crushed by the ruling lords. I would be offended too for someone to tell me that I come from privilege. Here is my ancestors dying and carrying on. And you gonna tell me because I'm white I come from privilege? That's silly. That's not a biblical student to do something like that. And you're surely not a son of Abraham or a daughter of Abraham. Now look what it says here. The social basis of European civilization was, quote, among those whom the Romans called the barbarians. See, Paul interacted with the barbarians. Who were they? They were the niggas of Europe. That's who they were, the barbarians. And then in Africa, the Greeks called them the Berbers. Same thing, barbarians. The masses. That's why they looking for Abraham. And you got these people running around here talking about they Abraham's, seed of salvation only for Israel. Man, you have no clue what the Bible talking about. You don't even know what the blessing of Abraham is about. You still waiting for some, and forgive me, because I'm not lying. I'm not saying it's to slander. I'm just telling the truth. They waited for spaceships to come in the year 2000. They went all up on the rooftops waiting for the spaceships to come in the year 2000. And then you got one of them apologetics from these so-called Israelite groups want to sit down here and try to reconcile they failed prophecy in the year 2000. Talking about you better be glad Yahweh didn't come and judge. You should be thankful. Are you serious? People, don't fall for it, man. What we find here, the Romans and the social basis of European civilization, the Romans had these people called barbarians. The term signified that the barbarians had their historical origins beyond the civilizing reach of Roman law and the old Roman imperial social order, which was the same as Egypt and Sumer. The small landlords owned the vast majority of the land and oppressed the masses. Notice this: the Ostrogoths, Visigoth, Vandal, Suevi, Burgundy, Alemanni, and the Franks peoples, that is, the barbarians, whose impact on the fortunes of the late Roman Empire from the 5th century was quick and dramatic. So God willing, we're going to do some teachings on this, where we're going to go into the historical background and show you, when they said the beast crushed the earth or stamped the residue with his feet and his iron teeth he devoured. Okay, there is a social context with that. And he's touching on it. Why? And what was this terrible, dreadful beast doing? Well, they created class antagonisms. And look what happened. These 10 tribes, they came on and they had an impact on the fortunes of the Roman elite, right? And look how the impact began to manifest itself. More importantly, the vast majority of the barbarians came not as conquerors, but exactly as in our own day. North Africans, Italians, Poles crossed into metropolitan France to look for work. In a relatively short time, in the southernmost European lands that were bound by the Western Roman Empire, these people were entirely assimilated by the indigenous people as primarily slave labor force. And Romans documents point this out when you know how to recognize it. Slave labor as a critical basis of production would continue without any significant interruption into the 20th century. See, you just thought the color folks was oppressed because you ain't did much history. Only history you've been reading was the history of the bourgeoisie. And the bourgeois want to divide you by ethnic group. He want to divide us that way. And these people who are supposed to be Bible students have fell for it line, hook, and sinker. And I'll close with this part. Now I'm going to a different text. This is Capital, Volume 1, page 896, chapter 28. Bloody legislation against the expropriated since the end of the 15th century. So I'm trying to walk us down into history. So we see feudalism, ancient Sumer, ancient Egypt. It continued into Greece and Rome. It was realized through feudalism. Now, we're going to read here at the close of feudalism what began to happen to the Europeans. It says, the proletariat or the workers created by the breaking up of bands of feudal retainers. In other words, as feudalism is collapsing, they're creating landless workers. And by the forcible expropriation of the people from the soil, they were serfs. They wasn't a part, they were serfs, slave labor. All right, Europeans. They make it seem like they all was rich and they all oppressed us. No, they were oppressed too. You're going to find the same thing in Asia, Africa, all over the place. Thus, we need Abraham and his blessings. But nevertheless, by the forcible expropriation of the people from the soil, this free and rightless proletariat could not possibly be absorbed as the nascent manufacturers as fast as it was thrown upon the world. In other words, they couldn't find jobs fast enough as they were being kicked off the land. They used to be serfs. Now they're getting kicked off the land and they find themselves in a terrible position, much like the slaves after antebellum slavery. A lot of them starved because they were kicked off the land. Did you know the same thing happened to the Europeans? Now watch this. I'm not going to read much more. I just want to bring this point out. They were turned into massive quantities into beggars, robbers, vagabonds, partly from inclination, and in most cases under the force of the circumstances. Hence, at the end of the 15th and during the whole of the 16th centuries, bloody legislations against the vagabondage was enforced throughout Western Europe. The fathers of the present working class were chastised for their enforced transformation into vagabonds and beggars or paupers. Legislation treated them as voluntary criminals and assumed that it was entirely within their powers to go on working under the old conditions in which, in fact, no longer existed. What is he saying? They lost the land. They were no longer serfs where they worked under the lords. Now they off the land, and manufacturing and big businessmen is rising, and they couldn't find work. So you hear the story about how Europe sent a bunch of criminals and people in jail and sent them over here to America. Well, here's the historical context. Why were they in jail? I'm going to read this part and I'm going to open it up. Henry the Eighth, 1530. This in England, this legislation began under Henry the Seventh, but in Henry the Eighth, 1530, beggars who are old and incapable of working receives a beggar's license. On the other hand, whipping and imprisonment for sturdy vagabonds. See, if you wasn't old, you just get whipped and thrown in jail if you wasn't working. They are to be tied to the cart tail and whipped until the blood streams from their bodies. Then they are to swear on an oath to go back to their birthplace or to where they lived the last 3 years and to put themselves to labor. By 27, Henry VIII, the decree, the previous statute is repeated, but strengthened with new clauses for the second arrest of vagabondage. The whipping is to be repeated and half the ear sliced off. But for the third relapse, the offender is to be executed as a hardened criminal, an enemy of the common weal. Now, that's a whole bunch more to read. I'm just reading that part. Thus, it is the history. See, we talk about history and we find the masses on the globe have been oppressed. Therefore, the European, I find, God willing, that's what we do in our classes, studying the agenda and the curriculum is to go through past revolutions, past historical situations in society. Find the same thing in Vietnam, find the same thing in Asia, find the same thing in Africa, same thing in Israel. Thus, go ahead, my brother. I want you to read that Genesis 18. See, you get people treated like this since the foundations of the world, since Nimrod, post-flood. See, it takes on a different light. You try to make it seem like everybody been living well. How in the hell you suffer these conditions and you die under these conditions? You die under starvation. And someone gonna tell you you're gonna reap the same punishment as the oppressor who lived sumptuously every day. Genesis 18, verses 17 and 18. These Gentiles want Abraham to bless them. And we, as Israelites, got to be alike to lead them into liberation as we march towards liberation. Read that again for me, my brother.
Verse 17, and the Lord said, shall I hide from Abraham that thing which I do, seeing that Abraham shall surely become a great and mighty nation, and all the nations of the earth shall be blessed in him.
They will be liberated because the nations of the earth have been subdued and oppressed by a disruptive minority. All right, I ran my mouth for a long time. So I want to open it up to see if anyone have any questions or comments. Let's be respectful now. Questions or comments? Feedback, whatever you want to bring to the table, it don't matter. It doesn't matter. Bring it to the table. You are this. The floor is yours. I'm a mute.
So I guess I go first then. Yeah, great class, brother Judah. Um, I thought it's very enlightening. How you brought to the table how yeah, we are a blessing to the nations, but only under certain circumstances or when we do certain things. Um, but some seem to be stuck on the idea that we are without fault, basically. But that's really not what's happening when it comes to looking at the scriptures critically. And yeah, we have a long way to go, I think. But it's good that these messages are coming out, so people can be educated about what it really means to be a blessing to the nations, according to Abraham. So I'll let my play right there. Yo, shalom, Ariel.
Thank you, my sister. Thank you for that. Thank you for that. Bringing out that edification. I think that is very important to recognize that. Okay. It's things we have to do. We must, you know, it's a role that we must fulfill. So, anybody else? Come on now. You got anything to say? Anything to add?
Yeah, I want to say some class struggles are very important to understand because to understand racism, to say, I think you hit up on it earlier, which was a good point. To say, oh, well, because you're white, you're born with a certain type of privilege. And this is what they're teaching in schools now, or they're trying to propose to teach throughout different schools. Critical race theory. This idea, this notion that everybody who's white has some type of privilege that automatically makes them guilty, and that so-called black folk are, by default, the victim because of the things that happen, in the course of American history. But nobody is taught class and how class is divided economically. I saw a video where, and this was probably during the time of the different protests that was going on in 2020. And you had these guys, with the same rhetoric. Oh man, y'all people that were arguing with some so-called white folks. Poor white folks, you can tell, like regular working class white people, not people who had the appearance that they was owning businesses or they appear to be rich. But these are regular, common pickup truck driving white folks down south. And the one white guy was arguing back, like, look, listen, you talk about white people own slaves. He said, do you know how much it costs to own a slave? You know, all the financing all the money that has to go into taking care of a slave and all of these different things of that sort. He was saying my family was been poor, like we barely could hold on to the land that we had, and so on and so forth. And of course, his argument gets talked over because again, anybody opposing a liberal point of view at that particular time was considered to be a racist. Or to make it more simple, if you look like you was repeating any rhetoric that Trump was saying, you appear to be racist. But understanding the class divide would allow one to understand that look, racism wasn't about white people owning slaves. It was a rich few that owned the slaves, a very small percent. And then you begin to learn how you had a lot of poor whites, man, who was getting basically their pockets cleaned out, who didn't have a stake in owning the land or owning the business of having slaves and so on and so forth. But they was worked. I mean, they was worked. I think some of the people that was frustrated in their labor, like for example, you had a guy on a horse who cracked the whip, but he was always poor. He didn't own the horse. He didn't own the gun. He was poor, you know. But the idea and the illusion that we've been presented with was since he's cracking the whip and he's on a horse, automatically he is the slave master. He's not the slave master. You know, he might have been boss or the foreman or the overseer, but the master is a very small population. And, I tell people to this day, money does not make friends and it doesn't make enemies. Money is what it is. People make friends and enemies based on their desire and their drive to chase money. And what you have is you have over over the generations, Now the slave owners are the corporations. And, especially with the consolidating and the buying out of smaller corporations or the competitive nature of corporate buyouts and so on and so forth, again, it's right back to the same understanding the class. You have the rich, powerful elite who, the ruling class who owns the corporations, and everybody, because even most people who believe this ideology of, you know, so-called white folks have a silver spoon in their mouth. Yet you go to work, and I'm quite sure everybody go to work who work with other white people, unless you work in some Fortune 500 company where everybody's making a lot of money, and even then you still hear complaining. But your average job, I hear probably more complaining about the scheduling, the the wage, or the pay raise, or the this, that, and the third from so-called European white folks. Black folks complain too, but I heard a lot, and a lot of them they work hand to mouth as well. But without understanding history, like Brother Judah pointed out, and also understanding class divide and the class struggle, you only see images. And the images that they always gonna play on people is you're dark, they're light. That's the divide. Everything that comes with that divide is applicable, but you will not be taught about the economic class struggle because then maybe I think I'll make this last point. KRS One had a song years ago called "The Racist," and he ends his song off by saying, "If blacks and whites didn't argue the most, they can clearly see the government is screwing them both." With a slight adjustment, blacks and whites didn't argue the most, they could clearly see the capitalists are screwing them both. So yeah, I just want to touch on that. It is very, 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 very important to understand class divide, especially economically. And I yield on that point.
Yep. Thank for that edification. I agree. I agree. That's one thing I've been reminded of with the elders who, the scientific socialists, um, should I say, the social scientists. They will always bring that, elder in particular would make mention of that. That in this study, the study of humanity, the understanding and the awareness of class struggle shall always be there. That is how we put this into context in a proper perspective. So I agree. I think that was good what you brought to the table. Um, so come on, anybody else want to say something? It's not too late yet, so you can come
All
to the
right. Well,
table.
I was holding up. I was waiting. Letting others go first. um, this was an awesome lesson. Thank you. Am I clear? Am I breaking up? What?
No, you nice and clear. Everything nice and clear. Yep.
Oh, okay, cool. Thanks. This was a great lesson, and absolutely that blessing in Genesis 18 is definitely needed in the earth. And what's what's maddening about it is that a lot of people just skip right over that blessing. I did as well. I did as well before I was forced to stop, sit down, and eat on it. No, keep chewing on that. What does it say? What does that look like? What does that entail? And once you get that, it's it's everything. That is everything. And we're making, and when I say we, I talk about those who consider ourselves Israel. We make the same mistakes as old covenant Israel. Like the decree that you brought out that was made that wasn't within the Torah law. And over time, that ordinance had progressed into just a natural law that all Israel followed, even the Messiah. I mean, even the apostles. And what that shows me is that the more I dig into this, the more I get to see how much, even though they walk with Yeshua, how much they actually really absorbed and knew in that span of time. Because there was a lot more taught to them after his crucifixion. And so it's like they were continuously growing as well, but at the same time having their life peeing before the whole world. And it just goes to show how much that that they actually had gained, had got from the Messiah. But I was saying that we are making that same error as the first covenant Israel. We're and I try to attribute some of that to learning. Okay, we pick this book up. And as time progresses, daily we chew on it and we're learning, and we're gonna make some mistakes, but some of the things that are being taught in the name of this God of Israel is just it could be blasphemous. That it could really be blasphemous, and it's dangerous because those people who are picking this doctrine up, you are really slowing down the progress of the promise to Abraham. You are really keeping the capitalists and the feudal lords, you're keeping their work just going continuously every day. So, great lesson again. And with that, I yield, brother.
Yeah, thanks for that, brother. I agree. Definitely, when you're looking at it that way, it is very much counterproductive. Hold on. I see someone with their hand up. Um, I don't know who it is, but I have given everyone access that I know of to the stage. Um, so just
Okay.
was that you, brother Vinny?
No, yeah, I just tapped off the mic. Shalom, can y'all hear me?
Yeah, we hear you. Well, did you have your
Okay.
hand raised?
No, I've been sitting on the panel for a minute listening to the pretty much the whole thing.
Someone have their hand raised. I don't know who it is though. I'm sorry. Hold on. I hear someone talking.
Shalom, shalom, family. Shalom, brother Judah.
Shalom. Is that
That
you?
was me. I missed it when you had put the invitation out, and then I raised my hand, and because I couldn't figure out. I'm still trying to figure this thing out.
Don't worry.
Um,
What's up? You got something for us?
yeah, yeah. I just want to say, I really I appreciate the lesson and all the information brought out, and I think that is such an important lesson to have. And I pray that the Most High heal and open the minds and the hearts of the people to receive, to receive this understanding, because it is, I just I don't that some of the things that I hear and I see being taught is is poisonous, and I feel like I don't, excuse me if it's presumptuous, but I think that it's indicative of the healing that's necessary. It's like bondage, in my opinion, and there's no liberation in that. It's like they're stuck in things that um in ideas that are tied to their own ego. I think because because it just seems like to 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 want to desire other people to be oppressed, that's poisonous. And it just doesn't make sense to me. So I just hope that the people will hear and receive this message. And that's all I yield.
Yep. Praise the Most High. I agree. Like she's saying, I mean, this thing, it definitely shows the things that we hear and that's being taught is definitely shows the necessity of healing that the people need. I mean, whether they do it or not is one thing, but those who are his will hear his voice. But at the end of the day, who's ever spreading these teachings of this vindictive of, wanting people to suffer. We're not just talking about judgment. I'm just talking about you just paint this entire brush of condemning an entire ethnic group. Okay. We know that the oppressors will be broken, but but just to condemn the entire ethnic group when the majority of them have suffered. That doctrine, I would argue, as she said, is poison, it's toxic, and true Bible students must be free from it. Got to get away from it if you have taken it on. A lot of people just never, they see, no, that don't really make much sense to me. But for those of us who have, because we have seen the suffering, and hey, that can appeal to our anger, but it is toxic. And we pray that brothers and sisters to get out of that.
Hey, you know what's interesting about that, brother Judah, is we when people had that mindset, we kind of fail to realize why King Solomon got blessed. You know, he got blessed because he didn't ask for revenge on his enemies, and he also didn't ask for riches. You know, and in return he got wisdom how to rule the people, and he also got the blessings. I mean the riches. You know, uh, so I always find that interesting. And even when you look at the people who was oppressing Israel, and when Israel backslid, I think it's a verse in there that states that the Most High was angry at somebody. I forget who it was, and I forget what the text is, but he was angry at the people who was standing on the sideline laughing and glorying in the downfall of Israel. You know, um, and he kind of held it against him. I had to find it and then post it back in the chat, but I just find that kind of weird. And then also when you look at when they came up out of Egypt, the people that got that covenant wasn't just Israel. It was a whole lot of people there. You know, and have you that they all got killed except for the children and Joshua and Caleb. you know. But I would imagine there was a lot of nations because a lot of nations that they took hold of that covenant and they came out. So they on Mount Sinai when he went into that covenant, I think they all was involved in that covenant. You know, and then some people will say that when you get to Nehemiah, that's the mixed multitude that got cut off. But I don't think so. Um, and also the kids still survived. You know, because the kids wasn't held responsible. But I just always find that interesting. You know that you hate being treated one way, but then you turn around and you want to treat others the same way that you hate. How other people treated you. You know, and I think that totally goes against what the Torah states. But I'll yield, man. Great lesson. Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. Thank you. We praise the Most High. We praise edifying. Hey, there it is. I agree with you. I think that is a hypocritical spirit. You are offended on how you're being treated, and you're gonna turn around and treat people the same way, or want to treat others the same way, regardless what they have done. And I agree. That's the Torah teach against that spirit, and that's why he will always he will follow up quite often in the Torah with, and remember, ye were bondmen in the land of Egypt. Remember, ye were bondmen in the land of Egypt. Don't forget where you come from. Think about how you felt when the oppressor and the ruling class boot was on your back. Think about it and never forget it. So you will not do the same thing. And, I think the true, sincere heart and mind can receive that doctrine. You know, the true, sincere mind. And I think it's a healing. Because again, if people was to ask, if you just talk to some people back in my high school days, I got into some trouble that some people wanted me to do time. I was young though, because of initiating bad things against another ethnic group, and I was picked out as it was true. It wasn't no lie, you know. And I was totally wrong about that. Got put out of school and everything for a while, and so, but again, I'm a teenager, you know, 17 years old, 16 years old. You don't know much, but the more you learn and you start to, get more knowledge of the world and how things operate, I think that helped me quite a bit. And like our sister Sandal Conrad, when she said a little bit of it tonight, but in class she said the same thing. How sometimes you hear some of the things that these people teach, and it just shows their lack of. It's more than a lack of understanding. It's a lack of just history. They're just ignorant of just what happens in the world. They're just only pretty much aware of what happens in their neighborhood or on their Facebook or in their virtual computer world. They really don't know. I mean, even going as far as some of them believe that all of the Israelite teachers came out of New York. I remember hearing that. Like, what in the world are they talking about? Like everybody came from one West. You had some of them cats teaching that. No, they did not. Nowhere close. But it's just the limited, like when you were a child, you limited on what the world, how it is. And some of these people, they 30, 40, even 50, 60, they still in the same position, man. Haven't, but it's there if we want to know. Seek and you shall find. It's there. Somebody was going to say something. I heard somebody open up something.
That was me, brother Judah.
Go ahead, Black. Come on, man. I got to hear my man, Black. Come on, back on the
Shalom.
Shalom. Hey, Nashawn, you know
Man,
who that is, don't you?
I, I,
No, say it ain't so.
You
man,
know that
yeah,
boy.
man.
Say it
Go
ain't
ahead,
so.
bro. What you about to say?
I say, man, I want to appreciate that was a nice, edifying present, good present home, man, after 4 years, man. That was good and edifying, man. I'm glad to be back, man. And, hopefully I'll be around, man. We got work to do. You hear me, brother?
Yes, I do. Yes, I
Yes,
do.
sir. We got work to do, brother Judah. I'm finally ready, man. After all these years, you've been trying to get me to step out on a limb, and I'm ready, brother. That's all I can say. And I'm glad to hear from you, brother Deshaun. I sent you a message, said, man, what's up, brothers of Monty?
Oh man, I'm gonna go check it out, man. It's good to hear you though, man. It's good to hear your voice.
Yeah, man. Yeah, man. Like I say, I'm back, man. I just wanted to tell you I appreciate it, brother. And I'm glad to be back in the fold.
Yeah, man. Glad to
Yeah,
have
man.
you.
Glad to have you.
We appreciate you. Hey,
Appreciate
I
you.
didn't.
Hey, I didn't.
I got to check the signal. I didn't get it. So we got to make sure you get on signal so you can be in the feeds. So I'm gonna check my phone actually.
Yeah, because I downloaded it.
Okay. All right. God willing, I'll check. I checked earlier. It didn't come through yet. Maybe it probably came through now, and then we'll bring you in. And then most high willing, we'll schedule something so we could meet face to face too. So yeah, most high willing, we can get it going. Some good things, good things. But I pray good things coming. Anybody else want to add anything? Want to talk a little bit or share anything? Or everyone pretty much I know Sister Sandal, Conrad Sandal, she might be asleep over there. She be holding it down. So you better get yourself some rest because we'll be opening up in Torah classes in shortly.
No, I'm still awake, but it's almost 5 o'clock here. 6 o'clock.
You get a few hours
Almost
in
five
before we
o'clock. Yeah.
almost 5. All right. You get a
Yep.
few hours in.
Yes, yes. So I'm indeed gonna bow out gracefully and catch me a few hours of sleep. But no, thank you again, brother Judah. It was much needed. Great lesson, great points. I got some too that I think I can use this week to battle down the haters.
Hallelujah.
Yeah, brother Black, welcome back, brother. Man,
You
long
remember
time.
him, right? Yeah. 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 So
Oh, she remember me?
yeah, man. Back she been around for
Yeah,
over a decade.
Oh yeah. How you doing, sister?
yeah, I'm doing
Yes,
good, bro. Yeah, sometimes you need to check out a bit to go back in, refreshed and, as you said, ready for the job. Great to have you back, brother. Hallelujah.
hallelujah. And he bring what's going on with Brian? Go ahead. Go ahead. Somebody gonna say something? Oh, what's
Say
going on?
that.
You got anything to say before we close out, brother? You was doing a read and give you a few words. You got anything you want to say, or you just holding it down, kind of quiet tonight? What's going on, man?
No, nothing too much. How you doing, sir? Well, shalom to everyone first and foremost. But yeah, no. After going over all the different scriptures, I was actually writing them down because Comrade Sister Muriel, she did the pleasure of posting them. But I had them in my history as well. But I was just writing them down for a second and just going back over a couple of things. I'm sorry about that. Excuse me for my silence. But one thing I would say, which was kind of revealing, and I know we talk about this a lot in class, but these guys from the camps, they have made all these different assertions and prophecies that have not come to pass. So when does it come to the point where we stop believing and stop listening to these cats? You know what I mean? These cats have said some things. The scripture tells us about, if that man prophesied and it don't come to pass, don't believe that man because he wasn't sent from God. So it's amazing to me how these guys got these big followings, and I ain't saying this because somebody's, because I'm envious or jealous of anything that those brothers is doing. I'm not saying it for that reason. I'm talking about for as far as the education of the people, and as far as for clarity. You got people following these cats, and these cats is just liars, man. They have prophesied things that failed. I remember when they were saying that the Most High, the Almighty, was going to return in 2019, and that hasn't happened. You know what I mean? 2019 came and gone. And it's like, when is enough enough? Everybody may look at us like, we crazy, we tripping, because we read out of different history books and we bringing up different scholars and authors and guys that's from the revolution. And it may seem strange to people, but I mean, at least we're just giving our honest assessment of what the text is saying. I mean, we went all through Leviticus, Deuteronomy, Malachi. We went all through these prophets and these writings of Moses, and we proved our position as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we did it scholarly, you know what I mean? And we ain't prophesied nothing. We ain't add or take away from the scriptures at all. We just brought the scriptures out, and at face value, what they say is what they saying. But you got these guys, they prophesy, they take scripture, they twist scripture, and they create their own doctrines, and people are still listening to these cats. So I think that what we're doing as far as, having these kind of discussions, hopefully many people, because, I sent the clubhouse to everybody in Clubhouse. I just sent it out. I pinged everybody I know on Clubhouse. I just shared it on Clubhouse. So hopefully people to come in and listen to our argument more often. And then, if they want to bring their challenges to the table, through the grace of God, God willing, we can all come and, give edification and clarify the sister or the brother that may come with their, whatever, with their challenge, whatever they want to call it. But at the end of the day, I'm hoping that when we doing these discussions and when we bringing these scriptures to the table, that if we truly be Israel, we can reason together and consider what the writings of Moses and what the prophets are saying to us. That way, like I think Brother Vince was mentioning, that we can move forward with this. You know what I mean? We're in this condition, in this situation, because of class divide, class divisions. Just imagine if Israel can make everyone see the blessing of Abraham, or everybody see the blessing of Abraham, either or. Imagine how farther we can get and how much more we'll be out of this situation. But I'm just starting to realize, from what I understand from learning at the school, is that Satan is realized through the oppressors. So as long as Satan or the oppressors have the people divided in this class struggle or this class conflict, the blessing of Abraham will never come into fruition. And I'm starting to realize that that's the whole plan. That's the reason why it's constantly white and black. That's the reason why constantly the media pumps the drama between white police officer and black pedestrian or black civilian. You know what I mean? Because it's this constant over and over again to create or to recreate the class conflict, to recreate or to create this division between us. But no, we all looking for the blessing of Abraham. We all need a blessing. We all want the blessing. So it's just time for us to just do the work. It's time for us to stop saying that we Israel. It's time for us to stop saying who's Gentiles, and for everybody to do what Micah 6:8 says. Son of man, what does God require you to do? Justice and judgment. It's time for all of us to do this, because when we do this, then the healing will be for the nations. Then we'll get everything that's promised, to our father Abraham. But as long as we continue on with trying to, proclaim prophecies and waiting for prophecies and waiting for signs and wonders, as long as we keep going on with this nonsense, man, look, we get what we deserve. We pound away in our sins, right? So not to go on a rant and go on and on, but I just think that it's what we're doing is very appropriate for the times that we're in, because this is all these. When you look on Clubhouse and you go on YouTube, this is all these other camps are talking about. They're talking about race. They're talking about whatever wars and all this other rumors of wars. Listen, all that stuff is going on, and we see it's high time for us to get on our horse and I mean really go out and about the land, proclaim the name of Yahuwah. But what's the context of proclaiming the name of Yahuwah? What does that really mean? Does it mean that, like you said earlier, Elder Judah, salvation by plantation? Does it mean that the ones who are oppressed is going to become the oppressors? I know that they like to use that scripture that him that leadeth in the captivity, that shall go into captivity. They like to read stuff like that and not understanding the context. So hopefully, through the grace of God, as we keep coming, because I know me and I know a lot of the other comrades, especially I'm speaking about the comrades that be on the committee and that to be in the classroom, Mario and all of us, Job, Nashawn, all of us. I know that we have that spirit that we ain't giving up, we ain't quitting. This is a life's work. We're gonna continue to keep going, to spearhead and move forward. So hopefully, the Most High give us that courage and that strength and the health in our bodies that we continue on, so we can keep confronting Satan, because that's all it really is. That the oppressor wants to keep us divided, and then those same sentiments of the oppression of the oppressors keeping us divided, it trickles down to stuff to people like these camps, right? And they keep the sentiments of the oppressors going, this division. So hopefully we can keep speaking out, and we can keep doing these discussions and these different broadcasts where we can shed light on what the enemy has done to man, right? Dividing us, and we can get back to this garden. And I mean, all this foolishness, this chaos going on, this war, all these different things, man, that we see ourselves living. I mean, all of us are suffering it, right? All of us are going through it. All these different things that we see, if we just do what Micah 6:8 told us to do. And I mean, God willing, again, as we keep coming with this heat, coming with these discussions, these wonderful lectures, just the Bible, not adding to the Bible, just the Bible, not prophesying, just the Bible. Hopefully, as we keep doing that, the Almighty will bless us, and He will bless others' understanding here, teach us more things, and then we can really inherit this promise or this covenant that was made with Abraham. But I yield with that. Shalom to everyone.
Shalom, hallelujah. I agree. We better do it because this word gonna happen with or without us. So we want to get on board. You know what I mean? We better get on board while we can, because when the time comes and he's, we better be ready. When I mean that time comes, I mean that process. That hey, sometimes I understand it like he told Ezekiel, go mark those, who cry and moan after the abominations of the land. And he know how to deliver the just and preserve the just. So we got to seek that, because that process of the kingdom is before us, and it's going to accomplish what he set it out to accomplish. We just have to make the decision whether we're going to be on the right side, and the time to make the decision is today. So with that being said, I'll see if anyone else have anything else. Other than that, we're going to get ready to close, and most high willing, we'll be opening up 2:30 Eastern Standard Time for our Torah portions, an afternoon class. And so, with that, anybody else before we close?
Yeah, brother Judah. Tomorrow you gonna be on this, or is it Zoom or what?
It's going to be on Zoom tomorrow.
At what time?
We normally open up that Zoom between 2 and 2:30.
Between 2 and 2:30.
Yep.
Okay,
So
okay. I think I got the Zoom. I ain't for sure though. I mean, it said it got the little. I think the little emblem on my phone. Let me see. Yeah, I got the little emblem. I got the signal, the Zoom, and the clubhouse. It showed the little emblems.
right. So what we gonna? So my part, I have to. I'm gonna go check. I'm gonna go down because I don't have my phone with me, but I'm gonna go check. If not, I'll text you the link. But if you on Signal, then you should be popping up because I got you as a contact. And when you in the Signal, normally the brothers and sisters they post the link before each class. So all you have to do is hit that link and it'll bring you right in. So I'm gonna go, God. Well, I'm gonna go work on that to make sure you got everything all set. So all you got to do is hit the link and you can get brought in. Now I got to go check out, do some investigating on my end now.
All right, brother.
All right. Shalom and blessings to everyone who came out. Seen some people I didn't get to greet everyone. Hashem, Joe Paul. We had some sisters on here. I'm running my mouth and I didn't get to say anything. I should have, but I'm sitting up here running my doggone mouth. And I don't scroll down often enough. So, appreciate everybody who was on. And with that, all of the comrades, brothers and sisters, God willing, we'll meet again. And I'll say peace and blessings to all those who sincerely search it. Shalom.
Shalom, everyone.
Shalom.
Shalom. Hey, LB, I sent you a message. I sent you my number to holler at me. I don't know if you heard me. Peace and love.
I'll text you his number then.
Okay. All right. Yo, cool.
I'll do that. He probably heard you, but it sounded like it was something going on in the background.
Oh, okay.
God willing, at least I'll text it. I just got to remember.
Okay.
All right. Shalom, shalom.
Shalom.